It's the second year in the league. He doesn't have a ton of experience on his belt, but I think they don't really give him a lot of like layup plays. I think they want to push the ball down the field. They want to pass the ball a lot. Like one thing I noticed, and again, this is talking with our quarterback guy, Derek Klassen, like, and he posted some good clips of this, like in the Cowboys game. And obviously that game went to hell later on in the process, but like Dallas is just lining up like Micah Parsons at the nose tackle spot, like on 1st and 10. And it's like this team doesn't believe you're going to run the ball or like establish a running game at all. They know you're going to drop back a ton. And this is an offense is really high in terms of like pass rate over expectation, if you want to look at those metrics. And I think that just puts a lot on a quarterback. It puts a lot on an offensive line that maybe it's not the worst in the league, but I still wouldn't say it's like an above average protection unit. So, you know, we're getting Sam Howell hit a lot. I don't think he's been great in terms of like second reaction plays. So I would like to see them get like, again, put some more of those layups in place, right? Like have Sam Howell just focus in on one read, because that's another thing that's been crazy about this offense is like they throw to a ton of guys. Like you look at some offenses and they have really quality players. They funnel to like 3 guys. I mean, San Francisco is obviously an easy example to come back to because they have like 4 superstar level players in Ayuk, Samuel, McCaffrey, and Kittle. I do think Washington has a great receiver trio in McLaurin, Dotson, and Samuel, but like they involve a ton of players. And I think when you're asking Sam Howell to read out so many plays like that, it puts a lot of stress on the quarterback. Like when I watch this offense, I feel like there's not a ton of easy buttons, and the quarterback is under a ton of stress, whether it's from a protection standpoint, whether it's from a route standpoint. I just think they've put a lot on his plate.
And real quick, so easy buttons. We've talked a lot about easy buttons. Do you have plays that you're like, oh, like, because again, you watch so much offense that you're like, oh, this is an easy button in San Fran. This is an easy button in Kansas City. This is an easy button in Philadelphia. Do you have those plays? And like, can you just give an example for our listeners potentially?
Great example. I think the best in terms of route combinations and route concepts to open guys up right now is probably in Detroit. They have so many layups for Amon-Ra St. Brown. And like you have to have the right players to do this. And I don't necessarily know that any of these guys profile as like that power slot player because they don't have a ton of size. There's a lot of smaller players in this receiver room. Like Terry's the biggest, and like you said, he's not necessarily a big wide out, but he does have to win those like press coverage, big boy routes on the outside. I love the way in Detroit, like, again, they'll clear everything out, whether you're running like deep corner routes, whether you're just running go routes from the slot, and then the nearest inside slot receiver is St. Brown, and he can just run a simple slant, a crossing route. I think another example is in Houston. This player's hurt now, but Tank Dell, even when he wasn't getting the ball, they would have him run, you know, these big, deep, outbreaking routes. And actually, it's crazy because he's a rookie receiver, but to me, he was probably the best receiver on like outbreaking routes this year. But then you'd have Nico Collins come inside as that X receiver, running like big dig routes and deep in routes, post routes. And those two guys would work in concert together to get one or the other open. And they have a high level quarterback who can read it out. I don't think Washington necessarily, like all of these routes necessarily work together. And I think that's been an issue for the quarterback to try to constantly be under duress.
I think that's fantastic insight, by the way. I think that's a really good, succinct way of putting it. And I think you see, you know, just like in the Houston Texans example, like speak to your player skill sets, right? Nico Collins is a bigger guy. Let him work the middle of the field. You can see that better through the traffic. Tank Dell is a very petite guy, but hyper twitched up. His route running nuance is off the charts. Like watching him run routes is spectacular. So let him speak to that outbreaking, outcut stuff, the comeback stuff where body weight is going to be kind of like to your advantage, like that lighter body weight, it can really decelerate and come out. So I think that's a great point. And then just finding easy throws in the context of what they do well. I love the example of Amon-Ra St. Brown as well. Like they do such a good job getting him into bunches, getting him in the slot, and being like, we're going to clear this space out. You're great in space. You're going to win this one-on-one. And Jared Goff doesn't have to read, like he's not reading drive. He's not reading scissors to the flat. It's just like, this is it. If it's not there, I can check the ball down to someplace else.
It's funny when St. Brown was coming into the draft, I called him Bud Light Cooper Cup, like at USC, which is funny because he's like playing as an outside receiver, but you watch him even just play as an outside guy, and like this is a player who should be kind of that big slot receiver like Cooper Cup, and then he ends up getting drafted by Detroit. Then Detroit's obviously got Jared Goff, and like we were talking about earlier, some receivers just work so well with certain quarterbacks. Like hey, this guy, like I don't have to read this thing out. I know this guy's going to be open, and I can just funnel him the ball in the middle of the field. That is perfect for a Jared Goff type of quarterback.
So if we take this to like the long-term view for Washington, if you could add something to their receiver room, and you've got Dotson, you've got McLaurin, Samuel's a free agent, like what would you be looking to do to kind of optimize this receiver room personnel-wise and schematically?
I think, Logan, you brought the point up about like Nico Collins and how you can see that guy over the field, like a big X receiver to run these in breaking routes. I think that would really help out this receiver room because you can get then Terry McLaurin away from that X receiver spot. And it's not as if I have really any issue that McLaurin can go out on the line of scrimmage as ISO receiver and beat press man coverage. But I think you could, especially as he ages, I mean, he's weirdly like he was an older rookie coming into the NFL, right?
Can we just double click? Your point's on point, but I just want to make sure the listeners understand. So when you're the X, you're on the ball. So you have to deal with these press situations a little bit more. When you're the Z, you're off the ball, and we can motion you around the formation a little bit better, which again, I think would just watching Terry would speak to his skill set a little bit more. So if you get a big hoss out there playing X, think like Julio Jones, Calvin
Mike
Johnson,
Evans
right?
is the guy that's
Mike Evans
out because he's a free agent.
Right, 100%. Like those guys, they're big physical dudes. You can see them over the middle of the field, and they can like kind of bully corners. Let's get Terry off and let him move around a little bit. But I just want to make sure our listeners understood kind of what you were saying there with the X and the Z stuff.
Yeah, 100%. And I think a good example of this, because I mean, you're right to say like it's good to kind of have these other examples around the league, right? Because I think it helps you kind of contextualize it. Like what the Bills have done with Steph Diggs, who's another, I mean, I think he's one of the best route runners in the NFL. He's been one of the
100%.
best route runners in the NFL since, I mean, he was a big reception perception hit. That was like back in Minnesota. It's like this guy, trust me, like is number 1, number 2, number 3 in success rate versus man press every single year. Like he could be an elite production player if he was just in the right situation. Obviously with a great quarterback in Buffalo, that's happened, but you also see them do a lot to like get him off the line of scrimmage and get him free releases, because then his route running and his timing and technique can really be expressed and can shine in that way. I think Terry could certainly do that. And even like Gabe Davis is a very inconsistent player, but the Bills are content to, even if he's going to quote lose these routes out at the X receiver position, if he can deal with those press corners and allow Diggs to be off the line, it helps your number one. Like you can have these guys who I don't know if they need to get like a Mike Evans or something like that, because I think Terry and Jahan Dotson are perfectly capable of being like a 1 and a 2 on a team. But if you can just get a guy out there to handle some of those X receiver reps and maybe eventually develop into a high level starter, like I think that's going to go a long way for this group.
Interesting. And then is there anything from us, like, obviously, they're going to be looking for a new staff, specifically head coach. We all assume Bieniemy is probably not going to be around next year as well. You mentioned Detroit. You mentioned some of the other, Bobby Slowick in Houston. You like some of the stuff that they're doing. Given Terry and Jahan's skill sets, is there anything schematically where you'd be like, that'd be my guy for Washington?
Yeah, I think those are two guys to bring up if you're looking for an offensive play calling head coach. Ben Johnson obviously would be a home run. I think he's going to get paid a lot of money. I mean, anybody that's
I think Josh Harris is willing to pay a lot of money. That's actually exciting for once here.
Right. That is good. You're going to need to outbid David Tepper, but he did turn down that job last year.
Tepper's going to have to pay a Tepper tax. So I'm not concerned as much about that one. I'm much more concerned about, hey, you could go coach Justin Herbert. Yeah.
I do think it's exciting though if you're an offensive head coach like a Ben Johnson, right? Because I wouldn't say this group is a total blank slate, right? Because you have good players here, even in the backfield. Like I like what Brian Robinson brings to the table, as a power back. I think that was kind of underutilized at times this year, and I think if you like, let's say right now I think they're slated to pick 4th in the draft, right? Mm-hmm. You look at that and you say, okay, maybe we get a quarterback at 4, whatever, or we bring back Sam next year and like have him compete with somebody. Like I think Sam Howell actually would be much better in an offense like that. That's going to simplify things, like throw to your first read more often. Don't spread the field a ton with these like 4 receiver sets, get multiple tight ends in there, right? Because I think I think Jahan Dotson can play slot. I think he can play flanker, like best utilized there. And then, obviously Terry, maybe he plays X and 2 receiver sets, but then moves off the ball to the flanker spot with this other hypothetical big X receiver we've brought in here, maybe in the draft, whatever. Like, I think something like that where you're condensing the field more is the best approach here, especially if you have to run it back with Howell.
Yeah, makes sense to me. Logan, anything else that you wanted to follow up on, touch on?
No, love it. I mean, I love the insight, and I guess I don't know how you draft. I mean, I'm sure you do college guys as well. Have you done anything with Marvin Harrison Jr.? I know there's some talk about him being there at 4. Just high level thoughts on him as a player, and is he as good as everyone says?
Yeah, I haven't gotten to prospects yet.
It sounds like you're very busy. If you're doing 8 games on a guy, it sounds like you're very busy. So
yeah, look,
no problem there.
I'm excited that the draft is supposed to be filled with a ton of good receivers. At the same time, though, I'm like, yeah, damn, your boy's gonna be busy. There's also
Miller,
like
we had Matt Miller last week, and he said he has 8 receivers currently in the first round.
No, yeah, it's gonna
be a long.
You're like, yeah,
it's gonna be a long spring.
No.
Not to mention too, look, obviously free agency. The first group that I usually put on the site in the offseason is the upcoming free agents. So even if the guys end up getting tagged, which this certainly could be, that's a pretty good looking group too. You've got T. Higgins, you've got Mike Evans, you've got Michael Pittman.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of, and by the way, a couple of guys that could fit. I don't know if you need to spend that kind of money on a free agent X receiver, but like Higgins and Evans, these guys are going to be in that group too of what we're kind of looking for here for Washington. But yeah, that is interesting. Marvin Harrison at 4th overall, if he happens to get there, because whatever we're talking about, like, yeah, you could have a developmental X receiver to mostly just take pressure off the other guys and stuff like that. You have a prospect like that in there, that would be pretty hard to pass up, because he is supposed to be that prototypical number 1 X out there.
Yeah, he's a potential Hall of Famer is the way that he's coming out, which is scary to put on a kid, but
yeah, a lot of,
maybe it's
no
a little
pressure.
easier when his dad already did it. All right, so the Reception Perception podcast is out on all your favorite podcast platforms, including the free Odyssey app, and then receptionperception.com and the website, Matt.
Yes, sir. Yeah, we got 3 tiers of subscriptions, something for everybody. If you want, like, we literally call our highest tier package the sicko tier, because if you want every piece of reception perception data I've charted since 2014, you get it with that package, and that verifiably makes you a sicko if you want that. But I appreciate the sickos who do indeed purchase and want that.
Logan's
package.
like, where do I sign?
It sounds awesome. And especially if you're watching that much film to support the numbers, because and especially if you're doing it yourself, I think that's one of the big criticisms of some other products out there, is that you get some people who aren't as well versed in the metrics grading games. So that sounds like I mean, I don't know how much it costs, but I'm definitely interested, I'll tell you that.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, no, I love doing this. It's the reason I got into doing this, and obviously I do a lot more stuff now from a media standpoint. But James, who's my co-host at Reception Perception and my business partner on the site, he's always talking about, like, maybe we can get some other people in here doing the charting work. I'm like, nah, you gotta pry that like out of my cold dead hands, because that's the part that I like, and I agree with you, Logan. Like, you can tell. I mean, Washington's a great example. It's like why aren't these receivers producing when Sam Howell's putting up all these numbers? It's like, well, there's a lot to it beyond just the stats and everything. And that doesn't mean that Sam Howell stinks or like he's holding all these guys back, but there's a lot of context that goes into the situation. And being the one to go in and do the film work is, you can tell when people don't do it. And look, I like doing it. Thank God, because it's going to be a busy offseason, as we said.
For sure. We'll definitely have to have you back to talk about it, especially if the Commanders go, whether it's free agency, draft, start signing guys, etc. Matt Harmon, Reception Perception. Thank you, sir. This was awesome.
Yeah,
for
job.
Sure. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Lynnell Willingham, and we are off and running. Lynnell in for Logan today, as Logan's with the family. Wishing you all a Merry Christmas Eve. Lynnell, I feel like this is a very different Lynnell Willingham. Normally we get like right before the game amped up Lynnell. People are used to in-game unhinged Lynnell, upset post-game Lynnell. This is a subdued. Like, I feel like the next 3 hours you're just going to warm up.
This is Christmas Eve Lynnell that's just waking up. We're a little groggy. We're here. We made it. I was worried about how I'd get here this morning. Beautiful venue that we're at.
Yes, Tap Sports Bar. Doors open in an hour from right now, so you can come hang out with us.
Let's just say the pregame may be the highlight of football today in terms of the Washington Commanders, because I expect the game to be god-awful. So
yeah,
there's that.
I do as well. This is a matchup of arguably the league's worst defense versus pretty much inarguably the league's worst offense.
32 versus 32.
Yeah, they're bad. The Jets' offense and this Commanders' defense. So you have that. And then, of course, you have the side of the ball that we all care about, which is we want to see what Sam Howell can do and try to bounce back after he gets benched last week. And that, of course, has to now happen against the Jets' defense that is very good, very good. And, by the way, good in all of the places that the Commanders have struggled. They have big, strong physical corners. They have a great defensive line. They're connected at all three levels. Lynnell, I know you want them to lose today because of draft position, which, by the way, if you're a Commanders fan, is the correct position to be in.
Yes.
But I have good news. The Jets could really cause problems for Washington today.
Yeah, they could. And you mentioned the defense. They're a top 10 unit in pretty much every statistical category. They're really aggressive in the back end. It's going to be really important, though, to see how Sam Howell bounces back. We've seen him get benched earlier in the season, them trying to protect him, but I think last week was clearly because of poor performance, so I want to see how he bounces back. What has he gotten to learn this week? Eric Bieniemy talked about it in his presser, him maybe taking some things for granted, so getting to take a step back this week, reset things, and know that he's going to be a starter. It'll be good for him. I want to see how he bounces back.
Yeah, I think that the Howell conversation is interesting. It has become extremely convoluted the last 3 weeks, where if you had told me 3 weeks ago that I would have this much doubt about him moving forward, I would have said, like, man, he's going to have he must suck the rest of the year. And 3 games of really bad ball. It also gets to, like, I don't know, there's to me, like, almost 2 different conversations of, like, what's best for Sam today versus, like, if you're Eric and you're really trying to win this football game, which of course he is, as much as fans might want them to lose for draft position, coaches, players, they want to win, and that's their job as professionals. Like, I think, though, that there is a little bit of both where that Venn diagram overlaps of you need to be more conservative in your game plan today.
Right.
If you set Sam back there and just be like, hey, bounce back game, let it rip, kid, we're going to drop you back 40 times, he's going to have something similar to what he had earlier in the season with a lot of sacks, and he'll turn the football over multiple times, a sack fumble here, 2 picks there. They just don't have the ability to hold up, and obviously one of the other big storylines today is on the offensive line. 2 of your 5 starters are out. Nick Gates replacing Tyler Larson. Last time Nick Gates was at MetLife Stadium, it was a horror show. That's the game where he got benched against the Giants. And then left tackle Cornelius Lucas in for Charles Leno, which is, I would say, not enormous drop-off. They do stylistically things a little bit different. Lucas maybe the little bit better pass protector. Leno probably the better run blocker. But all in all, like, Corn is the backup for a reason, even if he's a very, very good swing tackle. So you have the backup offensive line. You don't have Brian Robinson. And I'm very curious, with all of that said, to see how Eric attacks this Jets defense that is, as we've said, phenomenal.
Yeah, and we've made this a lot about Sam Howell, but I think today another strong test for Eric Bieniemy. Like you said, we know how aggressive New York is going to be defensively. How does he provide Sam different answers to the test, so to speak? We know they're going to try to send pressure. I think all the following 3 teams here to end the season are going to try to heat Sam up and make him get the football out of his hands. He and Eric talked this week about when he's at his best, he's decisive and the ball's coming out on time. And sometimes, I think Eric even alluded to this, sometimes the ball can be decisive. You can go to the wrong place and you'll still have a positive play just because you were decisive in your decision-making. That's really what I want to see from Sam Howell today. And then for Eric, with no Brian Robinson, how do they get to the run game? I believe Antonio Gibson got benched at a portion in time last week for missing a block and pass pro.
It sure felt like it because he only had 4 carries.
So how do they get to the running game? Can Chris Rodriguez continue to be effective? I saw Derek Gore getting called up for this week, so maybe he'll be more impactful on
Jonathan
third down.
Williams got concussed last week, so Gore is your third running back. Let's talk about Gibson for a second. I can't remember a player this good being treated like with this much flippancy
in recent memory where Gibson a couple years ago was a 1,000-yard rusher, right?
Feels like forever ago, right?
Yeah, 2021, he rushes for 1,000 yards. And, not that this is the ultimate measure of success in the NFL, but the man was in the Eastern's Motors commercials.
I'm about to say, it was looking jacked.
Was in the Eastern Motors, where your job is your credit, with Curtis and Terry a couple years ago. Like, his star power was that high. And then here we are. They draft Brian Robinson. And he has fumbles. Fair enough. Like, that's an issue. But for a guy that talented who's had success, to just seemingly throw him to the side, I know he's a pending free agent. I know all of this stuff, but I don't get it. Like, he, to me, should be such a featured part of this offense in the way that they feature Curtis Samuel, which is like the one thing that I think EB's done at an unimpeachable level this year. He has been such a great job, or done such a great job of getting Curtis matchups, lining him up in the backfield, featuring him the right. Like, he's the guy who's gotten the right amount of touches seemingly every single week. And they've been able to hit some deeper stuff to him as well by lining him up in certain places. And so I think that if you use Gibson in some similar ways, it's not the same because you get different matchups as a running back versus a wide receiver.
Right.
But Gibson is a guy that, with Robinson out, like, I would hand him the ball 15 times. And to see him only get 4 last week, and I like Chris Rodriguez, but to see him only get 4 carries last week is crazy to me.
And I don't even think it's limited to just last week. All season long, I've been kind of confused by the game plan and why they haven't featured him offensively. You mentioned Curtis Samuel being a big focal point of this offense. Think about back in February when the hire was made, when we put together that list of guys that would benefit from Eric Bieniemy coming over. Antonio Gibson was right at the top of it. His skill set is tremendous. I think you kind of alluded to it. It feels like since he's been drafted in 2020, we've been kind of waiting for the breakout and for him to be featured. We know what he was able to do as a rookie. But this week in particular, you may see a situation where he gets benched again if he can't hold up in pass pro. The Jets are going to send pressure. If he's not going to be willing to step up and stick his face in there, it may be, short for him.
I mean, the thing is, it wasn't like he missed from he didn't not try. It's not like he didn't George Pickens it.
Well, that's ridiculous. But
he didn't be like, I'm not interested. Yeah. He missed. It's hard. Yeah. Those guys it's the opposite of what a running back is used to. Normally a running back coming downhill, pop, pop, pop. We're gonna shake you. Linebacker coming, pop, pop, pop. Gibson got shook. It happens. It happens. Maybe it happened because he failed in his technique. If he's got a better base underneath him or his eyes are in the right place, like that doesn't happen. And Randy Jordan got ticked, and EB, former running back, got ticked, and they're like, "Nah, dude, you're gonna ride the pine." Do you think it's an
instance of where they're holding him to a higher standard? Like if that was Chris Rodriguez that misses the block, do you think he gets sat? Do you think they're trying to still send a message to him at this point in the season?
It's also the kind of thing where you wonder how AG is during the week, right?
That's
like
true.
how's he handled this?
Yeah.
The fact that he has been seemingly demoted over the last 3 years, where he's riding high, one of the superstars. The team's pushing him as a star guy, and then all of a sudden he's down the depth chart, and not just down the depth chart, but his role seems to be reduced. He's certainly not featured, given the love, from a marketing whatever standpoint. Maybe he's mopey and doesn't pay attention to the meetings. That's a possibility, and that's not. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I almost feel bad saying that, but like you just don't.
Something.
You just don't know, and sometimes I think it's important for us to acknowledge that we might not know,
right.
Because on the surface level, it seems crazy for a guy that talented, and for a guy that can help you win, and a guy that can help your young quarterback by being a nice outlet. And making big plays, and has at times made big plays this season.
You mentioned he's an unrestricted free agent at season's end. It always seems like whenever Washington has young players, their rookie contract doesn't work out, then they go somewhere else and have success. I hope that's not the case with Antonio Gibson. I really do believe in the right system, with the right coaching, he can be one of the better third down backs in the league. And I don't even want to just demote him to being a third down back. The nickname that he had coming out of Memphis, the weapon, I really think he could be that. 6'2", has really good hands. You can line him up in the slot. You can line him up in the backfield. It's just about, today in particular, I think, Craig, getting him involved. I think that's how you maybe be able to beat this Jets defense. You have the advantage with, your inside guys, tight end, slot, and running back against their linebackers, because I don't want to chest Sauce Gardner too many times this afternoon.
No, that is for sure. I mean, it's funny because you think, like, okay, what what kind of place could use someone called the Weapon? Kansas City?
Yeah.
Oh, wait, they're running the same system, theoretically.
So they say.
An offshoot of it here with Bieniemy compared to what Andy Reid is doing there in Kansas City. Obviously, that's an offseason question, one of many that we'll get to.
I can't wait.
Yeah, it's not soon enough. Here's how the rest of the show lays out here on a Sunday, Christmas Eve, the Take Command pregame show. Lynnell is in for Logan, but you will hear analysis from Logan coming up at noon. You'll also hear from the man on the mic today for CBS. Spiro Deedes is going to join us coming up at 11 o'clock. Kevin Sheehan in his usual spot about 20 minutes from right now. So long that Grant Paulson survives his trip to the mall with his daughter on Christmas Eve, that is a brave man.
Fun.
Everyone doing their last-minute Christmas shopping. Grant
get it
is
in.
braving the mall. Maybe it's because he needs to do some last-minute Christmas shopping. GP, get on it, bro. He's going to join us again if he doesn't, go under at the mall at 12:30. Plenty still to come. Your usual segments as well. Lynnell will look at Anthony and I's pick 6 from Friday.
Whoa, can't wait to see
Normally, Logan just tears Anthony's picks apart. We'll see what Lynnell does. Coming up at 12:15. We're stacked. We're locked. We're loaded all the way till 1 o'clock. The Take Command pregame show on a Burgundy and Gold game day. Welcome back. Take Command Pregame Show. We are live at Tap Sports Bar, MGM National Harbor, where they are getting things set. TVs are all on. Bar's getting set up, and the doors will open in about, 43 minutes. I can do math subtracting from the top of the hour.
I'm ready for the rush of people expected to join us here at MGM.
Yeah, I'm excited. It should be a good time. Coming up, 11 o'clock, doors open. We are here until 1 p.m. today. That is Lynnell Willingham in for Logan Paulsen. Paulson, you'll get his analysis coming up at noon. Let's talk a little bit more big picture about this Commanders offense, yes. Lynnell. You and I do a segment on my show during the week.
Gets me in trouble sometimes, buddy.
It does?
Yeah, a little bit with the people.
Oh, well, the show, if you haven't heard it, come on down. It's on the Team 980, 4 to 7 weekdays. Lynnell joins us typically 5:30 on Tuesdays for a couple of segments. Why do you get in trouble? It's like you're most calm you are all week. Well, I would think when you're in with the Rooster on Wednesdays is when you get in trouble because y'all – I never know what I'm going to walk into after you guys are done.
I'm about to say, I try to keep the takes pretty measured, but for Overreaction Tuesday, you try to get a little bit bold and spicy. This week, our conversation was interesting. We talked a lot about quarterback, and I know we're going to get into that right now.
Yeah, so I think when we talk about where Sam is, it becomes very interesting because it's so multifactorial, right? Mm-hmm. Like, we have to try to analyze where he is within an offense that philosophically, at least for me, I don't really like for him. So is he growing? Is he regressing? Is he at a point that I feel comfortable if I'm a new coach coming in with maybe a little bit more quarterback-friendly approach to things? Do I feel comfortable with where he is? And I look at this offense that Eric is asking him to operate and go, that was a silly thing. Maybe that's why I'm here and he's not, assuming that Eric isn't here. Or do I look at it and be like, that dude is one of the best coaches in our league. If he can't execute that, I need to get a new guy in here. It becomes very convoluted very quickly. Yeah. I tend to be I think if Sam was in a more quarterback-friendly system, and again, to use a word that I've used this week, it's not just a system in terms of like the schematics.
Right.
A quarterback-friendly ecosystem, better offensive line, some more specific, better weapons, big X receiver, tight ends that are better, things like that. Along with more running, less on his plate, then I think that you're in a better spot. And I think you can win with Sam Howell.
Yeah.
It feels like the number of people that agree with me, though, are dropping off like flies by the week.
It feels like it's going to be a small part of a big picture discussion that we have as we creep toward the offseason and get closer to the draft. What type of team do you want to build? Because a lot of people, the consensus is right now, and it's a consensus, not what he actually is, but his ceiling, talking about Sam Howell, seems to be a top 15 to 20 guy. Now, you can win with that in the National Football League, but it makes it way more important that you're able to hit on your draft picks and insulate that roster around your young quarterback. Like you're saying, it's hard to get a true gauge as to what he is because the circumstances that he's playing under is rough. This offensive line's bad. The receivers aren't playing with really good detail right now, and I think what you're kind of alluding to, maybe he's not getting the help from the coordinator that maybe he needs to. But I kind of tend to disagree with that. I feel like, and tell me if you disagree, that Eric has kind of simplified what he was doing in Kansas City to make Sam as comfortable as possible, yet we're still seeing him miss the layups routinely. We're still seeing him continue to try to push the ball downfield instead of taking what's in front of him. So there is natural growing pains that he's going through because he's a young quarterback. Some of them could be attributed to the offense and the offensive coordinator, but at the end of the day, I think it's on Sam.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because both are true. I think we had an interesting conversation on the podcast this week with Matt Harmon, who is the founder of Perception. So what Matt does is he watches every team in the league, and he specifically looks and charts wide receivers. And he's like, who gets open, who doesn't, where do they line up, how do they perform against man, how do they perform against zone. And so what it also kind of second layer gives him is a really good understanding of how different coordinators approach certain things and how they use specific skill sets. And Matt tended to agree with me and with what Logan has been saying, where there are not a lot of layups in this offense. They don't speak to Jahan and Terry's skill sets in this offense the way Eric schemes this thing up. And so I would tend to lean on that and say, I don't like the way that they've built this thing. But I also acknowledge, if you watch the tape, the layups that are there, Sam doesn't take them with the frequency and accuracy that you like. And sometimes it's just like, I mean, there's two great examples from last week's game, right? The interception play. Where he throws back across his body down the field. He's got Gibson wide open in the flat. He's got another player, I think it might have been Terry earlier in the down. Instead, he waits. He throws the ball back across his body. It would have been picked directly if Terry didn't get a hand on it because it was going right to someone's chest. Instead, Terry gets a hand on it, tips it up, and a different guy picks it off. By the same token, there's a play earlier in the game where he hits Gibson out of the backfield on a quick swing pass, and he puts it on the wrong shoulder. And so AG has to kind of turn around and winds up stumbling out of bounds. If he just lofts an easy ball out in front of him, Antonio runs underneath that, and it's a 25-yard gain, easy. And so sometimes it's big misses, sometimes it's little misses, but both things can be true. And I think that's what makes it so hard and why GMs get paid all the money they get paid is because the next lead evaluator here is going to have to parse that out and say, well, maybe if Eric gave him more layups, he'd be in a better rhythm, and he wouldn't miss that. And so it's a lot of projection. And then, by the way, you have to take Jaden Daniels and Michael Penix and Bo Nix and figure out what you think they're going to be and how quickly they can be there compared to whatever evaluation and projection you make on Sam.
That's why we continue to say, right, this is a super attractive job. You're flush with cap space. You're going to have 5 picks in the top 100. But whoever gets hired, the decisions you're going to have to make, it's super tough, right?
This is big boy decisions.
Big boy decisions early and often, and this is why they get paid the big bucks to do this, so I don't feel bad at all. But, like, just looking at it quarterback specific, right? With Sam, you have to go and, like you alluded to, go and parse through the film and figure out what's on Sam and what's on the system. What positives this year can I move forward with Sam? What can I build off of with this young man? And what are true habits that he's built? And then what are kind of just things that are a product of this offense? Because when I look at him, Craig, and I heard Matt Miller say this, and I think it describes him perfectly, he is a core base thrower, right? Meaning he's got good arm strength, but he's got to have his feet up underneath him, and he's got to be able to step into the throw to be accurate and on time. When you're behind this Commanders offensive line, rarely do you get that opportunity. So I do think it's interesting to project him in an offense where he's got protection, because we've seen it at times when he is protected consistently, he gets it out.
Right, but you get that because it's the NFL and protection's perfect almost never. But I also that's another really good example of, is it the system, the ecosystem, or is it Sam? Does Sam get the ball out on time, on rhythm because of protection very often? Maybe not, but it's less often than it should be based off the protection, because there are times that he gets antsy. There are times that he doesn't see things. There are times that he sees ghosts and vacates clean pockets. And one of the things I think to watch for today is if he gets back to the top of his drop and is patting the football and has happy feet, that's a significant concern for me. And it's something that I wonder if it can be coached out of him. And as he becomes more comfortable and more trusting, is that something that can be not a problem in the future, or is that just ingrained in who he is? And with that, you're going to have wild inconsistency. And if he gets the right matchups, he'll throw for 340 and 3 touchdowns. And if he gets the wrong ones, he's going to throw for 140 and 3 picks.
Yeah, and that's what it's been with Sam this year. It's high levels of variance. It's either been really good or it's been really bad. Here in the last month, we've seen more of the latter. Today, though, like you said, I don't want to project anything negative, but just based on the matchup and knowing the challenges that the Jets are going to provide Washington offensively, it would not shock me if at some point in this contest they went to Jacoby Brissett and they feel like Sam may benefit from sitting back and watching. I know Eric kind of shut that down during the week, but
I don't think they're going to do that.
I mean, if you're unable to function, though, Craig, at some point you got to – you're saying – you're thinking if they're not able to function, it's not going to be on the quarterback. You're thinking it'll be around, on the pieces around it.
Well, I mean, it could be. I just don't know that Ron's going to do that to Sam again. I feel like you get to play that card once before you go, this is – because what Ron doesn't want to do – both because whatever percent chance of him saving his job, which, by the way, is 0. But he knows that if Sam can finish if Sam plays 3 great games against these defenses, see, we got the quarterback, that will be his pitch.
That's the best thing for the franchise, too.
Right, and that's also it. Yeah. I do think Ron to whatever level of credit you want to give him for this, does genuinely care about leaving it in a good place. I think he's resigned to the fact that that's the best thing he can do is leave the franchise in a good place and then be on TV 4 years from now and be like, I set the foundation for them to be in this Super Bowl when I haven't coached a down of NFL football since I left. That's going to be his thing 4 years from now. Hopefully that'd be great if we're doing Super Bowl shows 4 years from now.
That'd be something.
But I think he genuinely cares about leaving the franchise in a good place. And I think if you bench Sam 2 weeks in a row, that is an admission that he's not it. And so even if he Buffalo Bills it to the end, if Sam is healthy, I think he finishes this game.
It's going to be interesting to see. I think today.
And by the way, I don't think the Jets are going to run away from it either. So they'll be in the game, which could be tempting, by the way, to put Jacoby in if you think that he could do it.
Yeah.
But
I wonder how many 3-and-outs we'll have to see before they decide, you know what, we can't function. I know turnovers will be a big part of that as well. That's what was so interesting about last week. It felt like they were winning the turnover battle for most of that game. And then
they were. And then Sam threw another pick. And they're like, okay, we've seen enough.
It's over.
What does Kevin Sheehan think? Well, I don't know. But the cool thing is we're going to have him on, and we can ask him. Kevin Sheehan joins us next. It is the Take Command Pregame Show, 106.7 The Fan, the Team 980, streaming live on YouTube as well on this Burgundy and Gold game day. Take Command Pregame Show on a burgundy and gold game day on Christmas Eve. Now, just what we wanted under the tree, the lump of coal that is Commanders and Jets. Lynnell Willingham is here in for Logan today, live at Tap Sports Bar, where the doors will open in 30 minutes. And joining us right now, as he does each and every week at this time, is Kevin Sheehan. Kevin, Merry Christmas, sir. How are you this morning?
Merry Christmas, boys. Happy holidays. Really looking forward to this game.
Are you, Sheehan?
What's your setup on Sundays? How do you take in the game/the games?
Here in my little studio office, and just today it'll be with family. But it all depends on who's home and who's not. If nobody's home, I go solo and watch everything in the whole day by myself.
So are you like multiple TVs? Do you red zone it? Do you have picture-in-picture? Like, because today, like I'll watch Commanders Jets probably with single screen. I might throw a red zone up in the corner, picture-in-picture style. I don't have multiple TV setup going at this time. But like on a day like today, are you actually going to just lock into Commanders Jets? Like, how will you actually do this?
If there was something super compelling at 1 o'clock, I'd have the other. I mean, I'll have the red zone on the other one. But I try to focus on our game, so I don't go back and watch it before the show, even though there's no show tomorrow. So I'll have plenty of time before the next show to get ready for it. But yeah, I mean, look, we're used to at the end of these years, holiday time, watching games that mean very little. It's happened a lot over the last 20 to 30 years, 25 to 30 years. It sucks because there are, it's the only game on the slate this weekend that doesn't include at least one team that's mathematically alive. This is the only game with both teams eliminated. And so it's truly the most meaningless game on the board. But for us, there is some meaning. I mean, God forbid they go out and play well and win. They've got to have options here with the new regime that'll be for effect. This is a whole new regime. This is going to be maybe a vastly different roster. And I want the new general manager to have, the most leverage possible when we enter the offseason.
And speaking of that, obviously the final 3 weeks is figuring out what you have at quarterback. We were saying it before we had you on, Kevin. This is a very attractive job for GM and head coach candidates, but you're going to have to make some big board decisions right away. I heard you had Matt Miller, ESPN NFL draft analyst, on your show. And if the draft started today, Kevin, Washington would have the number 4 overall pick. Based on what you've seen from Sam Howell up to this point, would you go quarterback at 4, depending on how the board shakes out?
Well, I mean, I think they're going to have to take quarterback seriously. I mean, I think at this point, seeing what we've seen from Sam, which has been some good, some not so good, but clearly nothing to tell a reasonable person or evaluator that you've got your quarterback of the future. You've got to evaluate all your options. And if there's somebody there that has a much higher ceiling than Sam does, you got to take him. I had somebody tweet me. It was just like the perfect way. Sometimes it's just, so simple. It's like, if the new GM thinks a quarterback at the time that they draft is better than Sam, they'll take him. If there isn't one, then they won't. And that's essentially what will happen. But yeah, I mean, come on, guys. Like, I think you guys you realize this. I'm surprised at how many in our fan base still think that this is so obvious that they've got their quarterback of the future. They're going to have to seriously look every option. Caleb, Drake May, Jayden Daniels, J.J. McCarthy, all of them. And I'm not even opposed if they fall in love with somebody, and let's just say Chicago with Carolina's number 1 overall pick is looking to deal it because they want to keep Fields. I'm not opposed to trading up if that's what they think of a quarterback. But we don't know what all the due diligence on these guys will produce. We just watch them in college. They've got to make that decision. But I think they'll take quarterback very seriously when we get to April.
No doubt about it. And the thing is, they might wind up being like, I don't know if any of these guys are going to be better than Howell because Sam has shown enough good, and quarterback has been such a crapshoot. I mean, for as bad as Sam has been the last month, he's probably at worst the 4th best guy that's come out the last 2 years. So obviously Richardson and others have been injured, but it is so hard to evaluate that position. which is why we have 4 months of radio shows to do it. Kevin Sheehan is with us, host of the Kevin Sheehan Show, 10-1 on the team, 980. This, of course, the Take Command Pregame Show. For today, Kevin, what kind of plan do you want to see Eric give Sam to best set him up for a bounce-back game after he does get benched in the final 10 minutes of last week's affair?
Well, I'm interested to, first of all, like, if you get the Jets interested and motivated like they've been much of the season on defense, this will be the best defense they've got. I just don't know what Jet team we're going to get now that they're mathematically eliminated. They had this fantasy that they were going to stay alive and get Aaron Rodgers back to play on this date and then run the table and somehow sneak in. So that dream and fantasy is dead. I wonder how motivated they'll be. There's discussion about Saleh perhaps being now in trouble, which is crazy considering he didn't have a quarterback. But I'm curious to see what the game plan should be. It should be a lot of quick game, like they've when Sam's been effective, it has started with a lot of quick game, a lot of design, get it out, 3-step drop, bubbles, traditional screens, and let's get them into a rhythm and get a defense off balance a little bit. But man, this defense is nasty. I mean, it's 10 times better than the Rams defense that he faced last week, and he looked confused and frustrated last week. So the one thing about Howell, whether it's in game or the next game, he's done a pretty good job of coming back. And, I give Bieniemy some of the credit for this, coming back after some real tough outings and playing well. So let's see what happens today. It would be nice to see him go out there and play well the final 3 weeks, but, not beat anybody, lose on walk-off field goals and have him as an option, but also a high draft choice as an option. But I'd like to see them, make sure he's protected. A lot of that could come with trying to run the football too, which is not easy against them.
No, but it feels like a necessary thing to at least try today. But then again, I've been saying that all season.
Yeah, right.
Last thing for you before the picks real quick. If Saleh does become available or Mike Tomlin becomes available, which seems less likely after they win, because of course they did last night and after everyone had counted them out, does that change the calculation for you of who is at the top of your head coaching list, or do you still want one of these young offensive minds?
Craig, I've given it a lot of thought, and I don't know. I mean, like, I wouldn't discount Belichick. I don't understand why people would say absolutely no to Belichick if he were just the coach. The bottom line is manager has to be involved, and there's got to be a really good fit between general manager and coach. They've got to be on the same page. I don't – Tomlin's very intriguing to me. Robert Saleh as a head coach, not so much. I'll tell you who would be very interesting to me if we're talking about defensive guys would be Brian Flores, because what he did with the Vikings this year defensively, that was one of the worst defenses we've seen in a while last year, and it's one of the best in the league this year. He can flat out coach defense. But I kind of want to know everything I can know about the I do think ultimately that's the direction they'll go in, and it might not be a bad idea, especially if you end up drafting a young quarterback.
Yeah, I'm not opposed at all to going with a defensive-minded head coach, Kevin. But the game, obviously, today on tap, 30-second offense against 30-second defense. Who do you like today in this matchup, and why?
I mean, it's like everybody has picked basically, I think, the same score. I was reading something last night, and it's like all you see is 13-10, 16-13, 19-16. It's like it's all in that general area. How about like a 16-16 tie? Something like that. So we can watch a full extra period of these two teams.
Why would you put that into the
16,
universe?
16 tie. I don't know. Like, part of me thinks somehow they'll end up doing what Pittsburgh and Cincinnati did last night, which is score more than you think.
That seems to be, by the way, I was stunned. The total in this game when I checked it Friday was 37.5. And I'm like, how are they getting to 37?
Lower, right?
Yeah.
For real.
I thought it would be
too.
like 25.
Yeah, me too. And I that's why I'm kind of thinking this game potentially maybe ekes over. You end up with something like 21-17, something like that.
Yeah.
Kevin, we've got some other intriguing games on tap as well across the NFL. I got my BetMGM app open right now if you want to give some picks, my guy.
Should have called me yesterday. I had the Chargers last night.
Nice.
I'll tell you the game I like. Like I gave out, I think 4 or 5 games for today. I kind of like Minnesota. Atlanta being favored by 2.5 over Indy makes no sense, which means, of course, I like Atlanta. I've given the Panthers out, as Craig knows, several times. They've actually come through 2 out of the last 3 weeks. I like the Patriots tonight to go out to Denver and play hard. They have been, the Patriots have been one of the best defensive football teams over the last month and a half of the season. I think they'll play hard. They've been playing hard. It wouldn't surprise me if that's a really close game out in Denver tonight. And I kind of like Dallas. Nobody thinks they can win on the road, right? Everybody thinks, well, they're terrible away from home, and Miami's laying a 1.5. Wouldn't surprise me if the Cowboys step up today and play well.
Will definitely be interesting. I'm very excited for that one. Then, of course, the big one is Monday night, tomorrow night, 49ers and Ravens. There's some really great games on the slate this weekend. Kevin will be back talking about it on Tuesday. Yeah, you're in this week?
I will be back on Wednesday. Back on Wednesday.
Okay. All right, so Kevin will be back on Wednesday. I guess I'm the only sucker who's working 4 days this week. Rooster's out like half the week. Kevin's out till Wednesday. Whatever. My dumb ass is, I'll be back on Tuesday at 4 o'clock. Anyway, Kevin, thank you for your time, sir.
Thanks,
appreciate it every week, and we will talk to you next week.
All right, boys. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays to everybody.
Merry Christmas to you, too. That is Kevin Sheehan, everybody. We get back. Eric Bieniemy had some interesting things to say about Sam Howell this week. We'll dive into the coach speak next. Command Pregame Show on a Burgundy and Gold game day. You'll hear from Spiro Deedes from CBS at the top of the hour. Lynnell Willingham there, Craig Hoffman here. Lynnell in for Logan today, who you hear from at the top of the next hour here on 106.7 The Fan and the Team 980. So, Lynnell, interesting press conference Thursday from Eric Bieniemy. And Chris, back in our DC studio, I apologize for not confirming during the break. Do we have the sound? If not, I have the transcript. So, do we have the soundbite from EB?
I didn't have that pulled up yet. Hold on.
Okay, don't worry about it because we're short on time in the segment anyway. But basically, I thought it was one of the – first of all, he talked at the beginning about, like clearly someone got in his ear and was like, hey, man, you want to be a head coach? Stop cussing so much at the press conferences. So he apologized for some of the language he's used and all that. And I thought he was then fairly, by his standards, candid about some of the issues that he's working through with Sam. And I think EB does a good job of caveating things and saying, like, hey, we all have to be better. But for once, unlike a lot of times where EB felt very politician-y, what you teach a politician if you're in communications is like, don't answer the question that's asked, give the answer that you want to give. Yeah. So it's like, that's a great question, but I think we should really focus on, it's like, I think as a journalist, you should answer the question I asked you. Yeah. But he did a good job of like answering the questions and talking about what Sam had to say. And to me, Lynnell, the most interesting thing that he said was, it seems like at times young quarterbacks can see ghosts. Mm-hmm. And he talked about how it happened with Mahomes, even as a rookie, where Pat would be like, hey, I didn't throw that because that guy was going to do that. And they'd just be like, nah, man, just throw it.
Let it go.
Trust the process. Trust the coaching points. And EB is like, I don't really fully understand it because I never played the position, but it's a thing that happens and we have to work through it. Yeah. And I think when you see, to me, that's the one thing you take out of Jacoby's performance last week. There's just a couple of balls where he lets it go. And you see that it works. And I hope that Sam this week is like, I can throw that ball. They told me I can throw it. Yeah. I'm going to throw it.
And that's the hope, right, that he was able to gain something last week watching Jacoby for that 9-minute stretch. He goes out and leads back-to-back touchdown drives. But as you mentioned, getting the ball out on time, being decisive, and just letting it rip, man. I think that's the best way to put it. The old adage is crap or get off the pot, right? So Sam Howell's just got to let it go. With this Jets defense in particular, knowing that they're going to heat him up, as you mentioned in our earlier segment, fans out there watching, if you see him today get to the top of that drop and he's patting the football, bad things are probably going to happen afterwards. This is one of those games where you get to the top of the drop and it's got to come out on time, and you got to get your playmakers the football if they're going to be able to move it. Back to Eric saying that Sam is seeing ghosts. I wanted to ask you this. This is a young quarterback thing.
Yeah.
He played last year a little bit at the end of the game against Dallas. If he would have been able to play more last year, how much further along do you think he would be, even though it's a completely different system? Because I do feel like they wasted him last year.
He would be more advanced for sure. Now, I do think it's important to point out that there wasn't an obvious place to start him last year, right? Like, yeah. At the time, like everyone wants to kill Ron in hindsight, and I get it. I'm not Ron Rivera's biggest fan. There's plenty of things to criticize him for. And if Sam's going to be your guy, if this was the long-term plan, it's very easy to be like, well, duh, do that last year. But last year wasn't happening with the idea that Sam Howell was the quarterback of the future. Last year was happening with the idea that they could win football games and make the playoffs, which was something that was true into December. And so Carson obviously gets the start. Taylor then played well enough, long enough to not really leave a window for Sam. Right. And then it's either Taylor or Carson to finish out the season. But the one time that you could have maybe gone to Sam would have been insane. Yeah. Because it would, like, hey, Cleveland game, playoffs on the line.
That defense.
Welcome, fifth round pick in your rookie year. Here's your first start. Yeah. That said, it would have been beneficial. And this is a very difficult thing that I think NFL coaches need to be better at, is developing young players and having having reps in practice for guys. And I think at quarterback specifically, it's really hard because most starters want every rep. The reps are so limited for everybody. And it's like, why would I sacrifice 2-3 reps when, we have 8 in a period? I'm not going to sacrifice a quarter of my reps for some kid that you hope might take my job someday. Yeah. And that's going to help him take my job because I'm also not going to perform as well on Sundays, and we're not going to have as good of a chance to win. it's a structural issue within the NFL, the lack of development. It's why I think the league is very deep in the background trying to figure out how they do more development stuff. Yeah. But it's difficult, man.
It is.
And I don't know what the right solution necessarily is. But in the immediacy for Sam, like, he's just going to have to learn, study. You play, you study, you adjust, you play again. And hopefully you really do the adjusting well in that cycle. And if you don't, you find yourself out of the league or as a backup sooner rather than later.
Yeah, it's a trial by fire position. You get better with the more reps you're able to get. That's why I think whatever GM comes in here, the projection that you're going to have to make with him, how much better is he going to get next year just based off of being a starting quarterback again and getting all the reps and going through OTAs and being the guy throughout the whole process. It'll be fascinating. For this final 3 weeks, though, man, the defenses that he's going against, I know we talked about it earlier that you think it would be crazy for Ron to pull him, but just to get a good look at everybody else offensively, if he struggles mightily, I think they will consider that at some point.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. If he's completely non-functional, of course they will. I think it's...
Would you consider last week?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was pretty clear that he wasn't seeing things well, and just, I think there's also something, too, on like a psychology level. If you get in that cycle, we've all been in it at some point in our lives with something, whether it's professionally, personally, where you're just like caught in the loop. And the most important thing to happen is get pulled out, take a deep breath. And I feel like last week was that. And the question is, when you go back in, are you calm? Are you back at square one? Can you pick up and play well? Or do you go right back to that like hyperventilating?
Yep. Sometimes you need it. Think about Kirk Cousins, his rookie year, and how many times he got benched, and he finally got it. He can't turn the ball over, and I'll play.
Right.
Stop turning it over.
No, he 100% did. But when you get benched, is that your moment to take a deep breath, or do you press and push even more and panic even more, and the problems persist? When we get back, Spiro Deedes, CBS, will join us. He's on the call today with Adam Archuleta. Then we'll get down to the tail of the tape coming up in just a little bit as well. This is the Take Command Pregame Show on a Burgundy and Gold game day.
Now you're hot.
Take Command Pregame Show on a burgundy and gold game day. Craig Hoffman, Lynnell Willingham. And actually, yesterday I was able to catch up with my good friend Spiro Deedes from CBS. Spiro, somewhere in New Jersey right now, probably on his way to MetLife Stadium. He and Adam Archuleta, along with Amanda Renner on the sidelines, on the call for CBS today. So we were able to catch up and wanted to share that with you here on the Take Command Pregame Show.
We talked back in week 2 when you had these guys. You know, the Commanders ultimately win that game. They're 2-0. How surprised are you that we're here now? They've only won 2 games since.
It's all gone downhill since you had us as your announcing crew for the game.
Is that your fault or Arch's?
Crazy. I blame Arch. I usually blame Arch.
Fair enough.
But yeah, it's first of all, it seems like an eternity ago. They were coming off the week 1 game, all the alumni there, FedEx sold out. You're like, man, this could be a team that becomes kind of a Cinderella. And lo and behold, all these weeks later, obviously, it hasn't been the season that everyone was hoping for. And it just shows you life in the NFL. I mean, it's such a cruel sport, and it's a fan base very similar to the team that they're going to be facing today that has been waiting for a winner for years and years, and unfortunately for the Commander fan base, they're going to have to wait another year. But really frustrating. Obviously, it's been something to watch from afar, and obviously big changes probably looming around the corner.
Yeah, no doubt about it. The defense had been able to change itself mid-season the last couple years, which I think probably fooled Ron Rivera into a false sense of security that Jack Del Rio would turn it around. But even that Denver game that you guys called in week 2, they really struggled. They gave up over 30 points. How surprised are you, considering what we thought of that unit then, with Chase Young allegedly coming on and kind of hopefully pushing this unit to be a top 5, that it has gone this way? And as you and Arch prepare for the game this week, obviously he's got such a great defensive mind. Like, what have you guys talked about of why it's gone so wrong on the defensive side?
Well, for a couple of things. One, just to see how different they look since the deals, to send Chase Young and Montez Sweat out of town. And it was such a staple of this group to have that kind of vaunted defensive line. But at the end of the day, when you have so much money invested in one position group for a team that has so many holes, I just think it becomes untenable. So while it was probably hard to see those guys go, I think they did well in terms of what they got back. Now we'll have to see what kind of moves they make to use that draft capital that they were able to bring in. That's one. Number 2, the scheme. It was interesting. We talked to Ron Rivera yesterday, and listening to him talk about the defense was interesting. I got the sense that obviously firing Jack was a difficult move, but one he felt he had to make. Those two obviously very close. They go back a long time. But clearly something needed to change. The thing that was a little surprising to me, Ron, from just listening to him talk, felt like the scheme was just too complicated. And so one thing he's tried to do since taking over the reins is simplify. And this is something that Arch is kind of one of his pet peeves. Arch always loved playing for defensive coordinators like Lovey, who really just simplified schemes, and they enabled you to play off instinct. I think too many times around the league we're seeing schemes that are just too complicated. Case in point, the Chargers, and obviously another team that recently made a head coaching change. All the talk about Brandon Staley and the exotic schemes and all the multiple looks. I think that's all well and good if you have a core group of players that have been in the system for a number of years, but a lot of times you see guys struggling, and to see a Chargers defense with all those vaunted bold-faced names that they've got, guys right pre-snap pointing, looking confused, and that's just not the way great defenses play. I mean, you want guys that are flying around and playing instinctual football, and that's something that Rivera, in talking to him, felt like maybe they misplayed that. Maybe the scheme was too complicated from day one, and so he says that he's tried to simplify things. Obviously, it's probably too little, too late. But at the end of the day, all you can hope for when you have a season like this is that your young players are making strides. And I think some have played well, some have regressed maybe, and at the end of the day, they'll figure out who they want to keep and what changes they want to make.
Take Command Pregame Show on a burgundy and gold game day, 106.7 The Fan, the Team 980. Spiro Deedes, NFL on CBS, is with us. I'm curious, Spiro, in those conversations, did you get a sense that there's regret from Rivera for not either making the change with Del Rio sooner or trying to implement those changes and kind of overruling Jack? Because that's where my hang up is like, he's been here the whole time. He's the head coach, and sometimes it feels like he speaks as a pundit as opposed to a participant. But you're in those like more intimate production meeting conversations versus a press conference setting or whatever other ways that Ron speaks. And since you mentioned it, like, I'm curious kind of as he's relaying that information to you, the tone, tenor, and if there's any follow-up on kind of the timing of it all.
I think, we didn't ask specifically if he felt like that change had to be made earlier. I will say I just got the sense from Ron that he's resigned and he seems at peace on the one hand. He's not an idiot. He's been in this league for a long time. He's such a respected football man. So he knows that probably this is the end of the road. And, new owner, even though they've got a good relationship to this point, Josh Harris is going to want to kind of bring in his crew. But on the other hand, I also got the sense that there was some regret. And, he mentioned he kept going back to the defense because obviously we asked him about Sam Howell. Like, what have you seen from a kid who basically is wrapping up his rookie year? I mean, for all intents and purposes, barely played last year. So we're thinking he's going to give us like a whole synopsis on Howell. And he went right to his defense, which I found interesting. He said, my biggest regret is that my defense didn't support our young quarterback more. He said there were multiple games this year where we probably could have won, or our defense wasn't able to play up to the standard that we expect. And he felt like that was a failure on his part, to his credit. And it's not surprising. I mean, Ron is such he's never going to place blame at anyone else's feet. He took ownership in our chat, but that he kept going back to the defensive failures. And I think that's the biggest thing that he'll have a hard time making peace with. Young quarterback, they expected growing pains. Obviously some disappointment with the offensive issues beyond Howell. Clearly the offensive line has not been good. But for Rod, I think personally, at the end of the day, when he's thinking about this season and where it went wrong, he's gonna start and end with the defense, and I think he'll take full ownership of that.
Yeah, it's so interesting too because he so often at times has deflected in the press conferences to be like, we got to talk. Well, it doesn't matter as long as we figure out the quarterback. Where is he at this point after benching Sam Howell last week when he finally did get around to talking about his young quarterback?
He felt like, he's a young guy, but he still feels now, obviously sometimes you get the coach speak, but I really genuinely think that he believes that Sam Howell is a viable long-term starter for a team that can contend in the NFL. Clearly, he's not there yet. Clearly, there are rookie mistakes. Multiple times he mentioned that Sam has pressed at the end of games trying to make things happen when they're playing from behind. And there has been some regression clearly in the last 4, 5, 6 weeks, however long it's been. But he firmly believes that this kid has proven that if given the opportunity, because again, he's basically wrapping up his rookie year in the NFL. And you can make a list of guys that had crummy rookie years, a lot worse than Sam Howell has had this year, and have gone on to have pretty successful careers. You've got a kid with an offensive line that how poor they've played, to be approaching 4,000 yards. I mean, that's not easy. He's been sacked almost 60 times, I think most in the history of the franchise. All of those things considered, I think there is some good with Howell. Now the question is, if you've got a top 4 pick, how much confidence do you have in the kid? Because you may have a chance to go get a quarterback who is a legitimate franchise quarterback. So I think we'll find out soon enough the powers that be, whether it's Ron, probably will be someone else, how they feel about this kid. But I think if you ask Ron, and this part of it is because he's invested so much in this kid. I mean, for him to, get up there a couple of weeks before he's probably shown the exit to say, well, I made a mistake. I can't expect Ron or any coach to say that. But I got the sense that he still firmly believes in the kid And obviously, he's given him every opportunity to succeed.
Spiro Deedes, play-by-play NFL on CBS. He and Adam Archuleta on the call today. So in that vein, Ron, I do genuinely believes in Sam. I'm actually more curious, though, what Robert Saleh thinks. As you met with the Jets this week and talked about this Commanders offense, what did they have to say about Sam Howell?
Saleh's impressed. And he said a lot of the same things. Like he sees the number of times he's been sacked. He sees the number of times he's been hit, and an offensive line that is certainly in the bottom third of the NFL. And a lot of times you'll see a rookie quarterback in that kind of a situation completely melt down. People love the kid's toughness. They love his resiliency, and he's got really impressive arm talent. The question is he going to get an opportunity to continue? The one thing I think Sam Howell has going for him is the rookie-friendly deal. You can get him. You can have a starting quarterback for the next 2 years at under $1.5 million per. I mean, that's pretty good living if you can figure it out and then protect him in other areas. And that's basically what Saleh said. I mean, there's a lot to like from an opposing coach standpoint. I'm sure deep down Saleh feels like they can get at him and make some things difficult, certainly with the defense that the Jets have. But he is impressed with some of the things that he's seen from the floor.
Yeah, I think we all have been. It's just a matter of consistency, which is the hardest thing to judge, which is why we get to yap about it into microphones, and the scouts and GMs, they're the ones that get paid a whole lot of money to make those decisions. Spiro Deedes on the call today on CBS. Him and Adam Archuleta get going at 1 p.m., of course, on your television. Spiro, thank you so much for the time. Greatly appreciated, and happy holidays to you and the family.
Happy holidays, Craig, and to everyone listening at home. Hope everyone has a safe and wonderful holiday season.
Craig Hoffman, Logan, it took an hour. We've only been doing this for 3 years, Lynnell, but I don't think this is the first time that we've had someone sub in. So you should
so.
You should feel honored, honestly.
I do feel honored.
I just called you Logan Paulsen.
I'm about to say I would love to be Logan Paulsen and have that Logan Paulsen paycheck.
Yeah, he did all right. I mean, he still does all right.
More than all right.
I think his rate might be a little higher than ours.
Just a wee bit.
But that NFL money.
He's great.
Especially because he hasn't spent any of it. The man drives like a 2004 Ford Ranger.
He's cut from that cloth, man. Yeah. And he's getting money on the side, working guys out. Casey Toohill, one of his prime prospects, man.
Yeah, he does a lot of stuff. Wears a lot of hats. But today he's wearing his dad hat, as he should be, here on Christmas Eve. So Lynnell, who's with us, and I holding down the fort here on the Take Command Pregame Show. Thanks again to Spiro Deedes for a little bit of time yesterday. He and Adam Archuleta coming up at 1 o'clock on CBS. When we get back, we'll dive into the defensive side of the football, our Tail of the Tape segment. Have we actually seen some of the changes start to help out this defense? Obviously, hasn't resulted in wins since Jack Del Rio got fired, but just heard Spiro talking about how Ron Rivera is trying to get this thing on the right track. What have we seen? We'll digest and preview how it goes against a horrendous Jets offense next here on the Take Command Pregame Show. Burgundy and Gold game day. Craig Hoffman, Lynnell Willingham with you on 106.7 The Fan and the Team 980. Doors are open. Mimosas being served here at Tap Sports Bar, MGM National Harbor. We are previewing Commanders and Jets mostly, but we will go around the NFL coming up at the bottom of the hour. Every other game includes playoff implications. Then there's the one we're stuck talking about. But plenty of long-term implications. Yes. And while most of those, Lynnell, feel like they're on the offensive side of the ball with Sam Howell, defensively trying to make sense of what they are, I think, is obviously important. Secondary, but important. And I think that what Ron Rivera is trying to do in simplifying the scheme and making them play better is obviously helpful in that. And then we'll see what the new regime thinks. But what have you seen so far from this unit since the change? And, you know, obviously they have a massive opportunity today against the Jets because the Jets' offense is the worst in football.
So, obviously, last week, I think, since they made the changes, probably their best performance, and they weren't really that great last week. But Ron talked about paring things down and trying to simplify things and ease the communication gap that's existing right now between the corners and the safeties. We saw St. Juste and Cam Curl blow a coverage last weekend against the Rams. To me, though, I think it's when we're talking about defense and how they're going to be shaped moving forward and what changes they can make, you just got to find ways to affect the quarterback. You look at every great defense in the National Football League, you affect the quarterback, whether that's a hell of a blitz scheme that you've designed like Brian Flores in Minnesota, or whether you have rushers on the edge like San Francisco does. I think that's really the big thing for this Washington defense, and it'll help out the secondary not give up as many explosives if they can affect the quarterback. We were talking about it off air. The defensive ends they have right now, you get a huge boost with James Smith-Williams returning to the lineup, so we'll probably see them come out with Casey and JSW as your two edge rushers to start here. We'll get to see KJ Henry and Andre Jones in their real legit spot, and that's as a situational pass rusher, and I think they'll thrive more in those situations.
No, I think, James, you made a really good point that the young guys just are getting overexposed, too many snaps. Yeah. And I think losing James is been kind of an underreported thing because the defense was so bad and they were out of it. But if we're talking about it within kind of the vacuum, in the context, in the bubble of these last few games, obviously the trades had a huge impact.
Right.
But that is amplified by the fact that James Smith-Williams is a starting caliber defensive end. He's not a high-end defensive end. He's the other guy, right? Like, if you have Montez Sweat or Chase Young or Nick Bosa or Joey Bosa or Khalil Mack, like, you have one of those dudes, which this team needs to pursue in the offseason.
Yes.
James Smith-Williams is a really solid other end because he sets a great edge in the run game. He understands how to play off of other players. He'll be disciplined, and he'll just do the job at a pretty good level. Again, he won't make spectacular plays, but he will allow other players to shine. And I think that's a really important piece to have on a defensive line. It's something that I don't think I fully understood until this year when you watch those four guys not play together and you see really the emphasis and the power of rushing as one. So I do think James coming back today is going to be interesting for the production of Daron Payne and John Allen specifically. So we'll see how those guys play. Also, John, Ron talked a little bit this week about how he's been battling a bunch of stuff all year long.
That explains it.
I do wonder if John's reps are cut a little bit and we see a little more Phil Mathis, see a little bit more John Ridgeway. I think the other thing defensively, and you mentioned the Curl St. Juste mix-up, and I don't know who was wrong. Clearly, they both ultimately played it wrong because they need to be on the same page, and somebody needs to pick up that wheel route to Cooper Kupp. But I think, to me, that solidifies one of the issues with this team from a personnel standpoint is they do not have elite communicators on that back end. And it's something that when I think about re-signing Cam Curl, I can't give him top-flight safety money if he's not a top-flight communicator. Yeah. And whether they get a stud linebacker who takes care of that and then you can keep Curl and probably be okay, or you get another veteran safety, they need someone in that back end to be the general back there, and they don't have that right now.
I think the secondary for Washington is probably the most difficult group to really get a true gauge and evaluation on because I don't think they were properly coached for most of the summer and the regular season.
100% we're not.
A lot of those communication issues, I think, stems from Chris Harris leaving and taking that job in Tennessee. He was, harping on that, emphasizing it, making things easier for guys. And it seems like since he left, all of that has gone out of the window. Particularly with guys like you mentioned, Cam Curl, we know that he is at least a top 15 safety in this league. I think he's a darn good player.
Probably top 10.
Yeah, probably top 10, but I don't know if I'm going to pay him top 5, top 10 money. The ball production for me is not there. But sure. Benjamin St. Juste is somebody last year when I remember that Vikings game, how well he played against Justin Jefferson. And I know he ended up going over 100 yards, but seeing him at the catch point, be physical, using his length, breaking on the football, I think St. Juste with proper coaching is a starting corner in this league. And I know it looks crazy to say that right now.
I don't think he's a 1. I think he's
maybe a good
second.
2.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so I think when it comes to evaluating that position group, determining who to bring back next year, I think is going to be super hard. A lot of them are under contract, fortunately for you. So
right. Well, I mean, Kendall Fuller is the guy that's not, or that is easy to move on from contractually, but he's been your most solid guy. He's a veteran. Do you really want to do that? And obviously, we haven't even talked about Emmanuel Forbes because Ron is not
It's a waste of a pick.
It's ridiculous.
It's a waste of a pick.
No reason he should not play more today. But it sounded like in his presser on Friday that we might see more of the same, very limited number of snaps for Emmanuel Forbes today. We'll see on that one and talk about it throughout the week, depending on what happens there. That's Lynnell Willingham. I'm Craig Hoffman with you here on the Take Command Pregame Show live from Tap Sports Bar at MGM National Harbor. And when we get back, we will go around the NFL. Tons of great games, a couple of interesting games yesterday that we can hit on quickly as well. That all still to come. Don't forget, we're streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980 and at 106.7 The Fan, and always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Show on a Burgundy and Gold game day live from Taps Sports Bar at MGM National Harbor. We are live, of course, on 106.7 The Fan, the Team 980, both stations' YouTube channels, and the free Odyssey app. We today, Craig Hoffman as usual, Lynnell Willingham in
There you go.
for Logan Paulsen, as opposed to just autopilot, Craig Hoffman, Logan Paulsen, Craig Hoffman, Logan. I have to think every time I do this show, I'm like, it's not the Hoffman Show, it's not the Hoffman Show. It's the Take Command Pregame Show, literally every time. It is time, though. We do this every week. Remember how to do it. To go around the NFL, give you some thoughts on all of the rest of the day's games, some key ins and outs as well. We'll get to the injury report in our game coming up in just a little bit. And by the way, you'll hear from Logan, his analysis on the game today at the top of the hour. Tim, can I get the music down a little bit in my ears? I tried to figure out how to do that in hand signals, and apparently all that coffee I drank hasn't hit enough yet. So I'll just ask you nicely. We got Colts and foul. Actually, let's go through yesterday's games first, real quick.
Yeah, crazy day yesterday, man.
It
I love the
was.
NFL with these Saturday games.
Yeah, well, even Thursday, you had Rams holding on. Nice, furious comeback by the Saints at the end, but the Rams do enough there. 328, 2 touchdowns for Matthew Stafford, 104 yards on the ground for Kyren Williams. Puka Nacua, 164. He is on pace for a record-breaking season, which just, if you want to be a record-breaking wide receiver, play with Matthew Stafford.
Yeah, that's
Calvin Johnson's got a bunch. Cooper Kupp's got some. Nacua on the way to one of the best rookie seasons we've ever seen. Then you had Bengals and Steelers yesterday. Both teams now 8-7 after a 24-0 first-half blowout by Pittsburgh. They hold on to shut them out in the fourth quarter as well. 34-11. Browning 3 INTs in the game despite 335 yards.
Yeah, the story, though, Mason Rudolph, man, letting it go, getting the ball out on time. George Pickens comes alive, 4 catches, $195, and 2 touchdowns. Did you see the Jalen Warren block that's made its rounds on social media? George Pickens could take a lesson or two from the running back, man. Just dog effort.
Yeah. But this was a classic Mike Tomlin game.
It was. As soon as you think they're down and out.
Everything's going wrong.
Yeah.
Oh, look, they won, and now they're over 500. Then last night, Bills hold on for dear life to beat Easton Stick and the Chargers 24-22. Not going to lie, Lynnell, I didn't watch a second of this game.
Yeah, I caught the tail end of it in some highlights. The Bills are interesting, right? At 9-6, they have their deficiencies on offense. Josh Allen can't stop turning the football over. But in a one-game playoff scenario, there isn't a team in the AFC that I want to see. That's
no, they can win the Super Bowl.
100%.
They could also
100%.
not make the playoffs. They are so inconsistent, but they are so dangerous. I do think the thing that's impressive about them is it took them a couple of weeks. They had all those injuries, but they have now seemingly righted the ship on defense. Like, they found a stable point. They're not as good as they were.
Right.
But without Milano, without some of the other guys that went out, they've found a way to piece it together, and McDermott's become more solid, it seems, as a play caller based off the results anyway, that they're playing some better ball. All right, as for the slate today, Colts, Falcons. Sneaky, interesting game here. Falcons, of course, trying to stay alive in the NFC South. They are 3-point favorites at home over the Colts, who will not have Zach Moss. But I do believe Jonathan Taylor's back in this game, if I'm remembering correctly.
I do think he is. I was able to almost put a bet in on Jonathan Taylor. There he is.
Yeah, Jonathan Taylor in, Zach Moss out, Michael Pittman out of this one as well, the wide receiver who got banged up last week. The concussion, he's okay. It is actually with a shoulder issue that he also apparently either aggravated in practice or picked up in the game last week.
It's a nasty hit.
But yeah, that hit from Damontae Kazee, which now has Kazee out for the year, which feels appropriate considering how many times he's been suspended over his career.
Yeah, that's interesting. On the Kazee front, question for you. If they make the playoffs, does –
Oh, that's a good question.
Does he get to come back?
I actually don't know. I think that he is – I think he's suspended for the rest of the regular season. So that's a good question.
Yeah.
The Falcons would love to have to find out. But if they do it, it'll be behind Taylor Heineke.
Yes, sir.
Desmond Ridder bench again.
We'll see if Arthur Smith can get the offense rectified with Heineke. They're having young quarterback issues in Atlanta. Desmond Ridder can't stop turning it over. He holds the ball too long, takes bad sacks. It makes no sense that he's not able to succeed because when you talk about the weaponry around him, they got a good offensive line. Your skill position group is good. The quarterback's just not good.
Like we talk about Sam being so leveraged here, like, and what would it look like in a system where you have less on the quarterback? What we're talking about is what they do in Atlanta.
Yes.
Sam in Atlanta would kill.
Might be a star. He'd be a Pro Bowler.
Like Desmond Ridder has one of the easiest quarterback jobs in the entire league, and he can't do it
for whatever reason
because he's not that good. Seahawks, Titans.
I'm intrigued by this
one. Titans 5-9 on the year, but plucky. Seahawks only 3-point favorites on the road, Lynnell.
Yeah, backup quarterback versus backup quarterback. I think is Geno Smith.
I think Geno's back. I think
Geno does get this. That's interesting because I feel like Drew Lock the last 2 weeks has kind of outplayed Geno and what he had looked like before that. The Titans are sneaky. They're a physical team. Mike Vrabel's teams are going to be ready to play each and every week. Their pass rush is legit. I think that may be the reason they get this one today. DeAndre Hopkins also can go over 1,000 yards today, which is kind of crazy because people thought he was done.
Yeah, and first couple weeks he looked done, and then all of a sudden things are going well. Probably the game of the day in the 1 o'clock window is the Lions and the Vikings. Every time we look up to one of the pregame shows here at TAP, looking up at the Fox one right there. There's Jared Goff throwing the football. Lions on the road in Minnesota, favored by 3. Can Brian Flores figure out a way to stop this high-powered Lions offense that has been on a roll the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, I think they will be able to. Brian Flores has been blitzing the heck out of people. Jared Goff and this Lions offense don't do well under pressure. The last time Brian Flores coached against Jared Goff, 3 interceptions and a touchdown. So there's that. I think the Vikings got it going on. Is it Nick Mullins under center today for the Vikings?
Sure is.
Hopefully T.J. Hawkinson, Jordan Addison, and Justin Jefferson are able to get off, man, because they're a good team if they have a quarterback.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Mullins is a super high variance guy, super duper. Like he'll throw for 300 a couple times a season if he were to be given a full season worth of start. The problem is he'd probably cost you about 7 games in between that. So it's a matter of who shows up on that side of it. I like Detroit today. If they win, it will be their first division title since 1993. Were you alive?
No. I was about to say, was I even existing? I wouldn't even have thought.
The Detroit Lions will win the NFC North for the first time.
And then get one and done
in Lynnell's life.
Yeah.
Packers and Panthers. Panthers, can't say this often, coming off a win. Oh, yeah.
Absolutely ridiculous. The storyline to me is on the other side. I think
of course the storyline's on the other side.
I think what Matt LaFleur is doing with Jordan Love is incredible. 25 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. They had a really good draft. They're a young group of receivers, and then Tucker Kraft, the tight end. They're doing really good things. That LaFleur guy can coach, can't he, man?
He's real good. Probably the most underrated guy because he's so – I mean, 1, he had Rodgers, and 2, he hasn't broken through to a Super Bowl yet in the way that Kyle and Sean have. And
right on the doorstep,
the personality that McDaniels has. But LaFleur, just as good as the rest of them. I want to circle back just so people realize 25-11 for Jordan Love.
That's
like, do you realize
good numbers?
How few quarterbacks in Washington franchise history have seasons of 25-11?
Yeah.
Like they certainly haven't had one since Cousins, and that was like Kirk's good years were right around those numbers, and Love had this up and down. Is he actually any good year? And he's 25-11 with 3 games to go.
He's a rookie, basically.
Yeah. I mean, he is one that I don't like calling a rookie as much. I like first-year starter.
Yes.
He's at least been around for 3 years, understudying Aaron Rodgers, where Sam had like 1 year with chaos.
Yeah.
Sam gets to be called a rookie. Browns, I make the rules here. Browns and Texans.
Spicy one, Craig.
Yeah, Joe Flacco keeps finding ways to win football games.
Yeah.
Texans, they'll have Nico Collins today, but C.J. Stroud likely not back or is certainly not back till at least next week, likely back next week, but he's out today. So you got Joe Flacco versus Case Keenum. Not the first time they've matched up.
Really?
I think I saw a meme this week or a picture this week. 2016, I believe, was the year.
Forever
Flacco
ago.
in Baltimore. Keenum was in Houston at least one time ago. I feel like he's been there 4 times.
I'm about to say, yeah, it is kind of crazy. In this matchup, if they can get Devin Singletary going, man, I think that the Texans will have a shot. They got to have balance. What the Browns are doing on defense is impressive. We were talking about it in the break. Kevin Stefanski and D'Amico Ryans, 2 strong favorites for Coach of the Year. We'll see who gets it done today.
Yeah, I like the Browns today. They've just found ways to win. But then again, this Texans team also has found a ton of ways to win. They are super, super plucky. Jags and, plucky team down there in Houston.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like people in Houston would like that term.
Uh-huh.
Hey, we're just a plucky old football team.
That's it.
Jags and Buccaneers.
Another
Jags, 1-point favorites on the road at Tampa. I actually like Tampa in this game.
Yeah.
I think they are, they're not good, but they're definitely the best team in the South. And Baker has just gotten better as the year has gone on. Now, granted, his inconsistency over his career, he could be due for a mega stinker today. Because a reminder, Lynnell, last week he was the first ever quarterback in the history of Lambeau Field to go in as a visitor and come out with a perfect passer rating.
That's a hell of a
That
goal.
is how good he was last week. Can he do it today at home with the Jags in town?
Yeah, they're another team that, lives and dies with balance. Rashad White has done a really good job out of the backfield as a receiver and in between the tackles as a runner. We were talking about Dave Canales and how, beneficial he's been for Baker Mayfield. This is the second straight season he's taken a quarterback that looked like their career was about to be over and then giving them a career renaissance. He did it last year with Geno. I think Baker and the Bucs are actually a good team. There are certain matchups in the NFC playoff picture. Like if they have a rematch against Philly and they host the Eagles, I could see them beating Philadelphia in a one-off.
Yeah, I mean, they're dangerous. I mean, Mike
are.
Evans, that defense has some playmakers, so going to be an interesting one today. And just, I don't know what to make of Jacksonville week in and week out. Trevor Lawrence is going to start, so that's helpful. But
smart that is,
I don't trust them at all. Cardinals and Bears, kind of a fun game to watch.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Kinda.
Maybe, but not really that important. I will say this. I'm in a weird spot, like Washington fan weird spot with Chicago.
Yeah.
I want them to lose because I want that second rounder to be as high as possible.
Right.
I want them to win because I don't want Matt Eberflus to get fired.
Yeah, because that becomes a destination.
That becomes, you want high draft pick, you want cap space, you want stable ownership, you want all that stuff. Historic franchise. Chicago is appealing.
Yeah.
And especially if you really like Caleb Williams as an offensive-minded coach. So if Matt Eberflus can hang on to his job, I think that's best case scenario for Washington. The problem is that pick in the second round goes from being maybe the 5th pick to the 9th pick in the second round, the one you're getting in exchange for Montez Sweat. So I don't know what to do from a rooting interest. In some ways it's a lose-lose. In some ways it's a win-win.
For sure.
Meanwhile, the Cardinals, what are they doing? Because
they're supposed to be horrible.
Well, they are 3-11.
They're competitively horrible, though.
They're competitively horrible, which I give credit to Jonathan Gannon. But also, didn't they bench Kyler last week?
I did not see that, but if he did get benched,
I definitely saw some Clayton Tune last week, and I keep meaning to follow up on that.
Wow.
But
It may have been a blowout scenario. I don't know.
I don't know.
I thought Kyler has played well since he's gotten in there. It makes their rebuild, it gets it accelerated if he's able to be their long-term guy, and it seems like he is.
Oh, I mean, yeah. If not, good luck with that contract. Let's do this. We can talk quickly about Patriots and Broncos. I don't know if there's much to talk about here. Denver's 7.5-point favorites. Sheehan does like them to cover New England.
Yeah.
But I think this will be pretty easy for those of us that are like, okay, hey, we'd like to watch some football and some basketball all day tomorrow on Christmas. I'll sacrifice the Sunday nighter.
Yeah,
tonight.
right, exactly.
So
it's not going to be good.
There's that. Which leaves us a full segment, Lynnell, to talk about Cowboys-Dolphins and the Monday night game, Ravens and 49ers.
You mean
We
the
also
Super
have
Bowl preview?
Raiders, Chiefs, Giants, Eagles as well. We'll talk about all those next. The Take Command Pregame Show on a Burgundy and Gold game day. Command Pregame Show on a burgundy and gold game day. We are live at Tap Sports Bar, MGM National Harbor. Lynnell Willingham there, Craig Hoffman here on 106.7 The Fan, the Team 980 YouTube, and of course streaming live. Where, Lynnell?
Free Odyssey app, baby.
Yeah.
Come on, man.
Always ready for that pop quiz.
Always.
Company man right here. Cha-ching. All right, let's get back to some of the key games around the NFL this weekend.
I'm excited for Dallas and Miami, man.
I am really excited for this game. Both teams have a lot to prove.
Yes.
These are mirror images of each other.
Yep.
Really high-powered offenses, defenses that are probably a little bit underrated, and two teams that have a reputation for not having beat anybody. The Cowboys now have pushed that off a little bit thanks to the Eagles win a couple of weeks ago, but they then they follow that up with getting trounced last week. So can Dallas bounce back? Can Miami prove that they're for real? I actually think both teams will come out and play well. I'm picking Miami in the game, but I think this is a 35-34, 35-30. This is going to be a really well played. I think. See what happens. But I think this will be a very well played, tough game where we come out with both teams being like, you want to know what? Those are legitimate contenders.
Yeah, before last weekend, I thought this would be like a runaway for Dallas. I think they were out physical Miami. But seeing what Buffalo was able to do on the ground with James Cook, I expect Miami to come out and emulate that exact same game plan. Raheem Mostert, Devon Achane and company are going to be able to have their way in between the tackles and on the perimeter. But on the flip side for Dallas, you know how to shut down this Miami offense is if you take the rhythm out of this offense and knock two off of his spot. I think with their pass rush and the ability to win quick on the interior with Odighizuwa and company and Mozzie Smith, that they should be able to get him off of his spot. I do like Dallas in this one. I agree with you. It'll be a lot of offense. I think it'll be close, though, down the stretch.
Yeah, I just think it's a game. We'll see who wins it, where we come out of it, and our opinion of each team doesn't change a whole lot.
Right.
It's competitive. It's well played. At least that's what we're hoping for. 4:25 on Fox this afternoon. Then you got three games tomorrow, kind of like the Thanksgiving schedule style. Raiders and Chiefs, 1 o'clock on CBS. It's so funny seeing KC favored by 10.5 when they have been this up and down team. The Raiders are coming off a game where they scored 63 points, and they are 10.5-point dogs in Kansas City.
Yeah, this is I'll say this about the next game, too. This is a trap game, I think, for Kansas City. The Raiders, under Antonio Pierce, are playing hard. They're playing for one another. Offensively, they're still kind of challenged. I don't really believe in Aiden O'Connell, but defensively, that pass rush is still legit. Max Crosby is having a heck of a year. If they can force Mahomes into a turnover or two, I think they have a shot. The Chiefs, we've been saying it all year long, Craig. We're waiting for this offense to finally turn around. Defensively, they've been top 5, top 10 in every statistical category. Trent McDuffie's playing at a Defensive Player of the Year level. They're a good group, but can the offense finally come around? Rashee Rice broke out last week once again, so we'll see what they got.
But how many times do you get to break out? At some point, consistency, hey, can we expect this? And that's been the thing. The Chiefs' offense is playing well, except for the catch the football part.
Yeah.
Right?
They've been running it well, too.
Their wide receivers need to just catch the football. And if that can happen, and by the way, Kadarius Toney, who's been the worst defender probably, is out today with an injury. So can they find Rashee Rice? Can they get Marquez Valdez-Scantling? Can they get some of these guys to be consistent and just catch the balls that Mahomes puts on them? If so, they're going to be fine. System still works. Guys get open, all that kind of stuff. Defense playing lights out. If not,
could be one and done.
They're not going to get very far in the playoffs.
No.
Giants and Eagles. Eagles looking to snap a 3-game losing streak. That's like as many losses as Jalen Hurts had in his career, almost literally. I think he had lost 5 games prior to this losing streak as a starter. He was like 34-5 or something like that. Now he's lost 3 straight. There's rumors coming out of Philly about his leadership, all kinds of, the sky is falling. Don't worry, the Giants are in town. They're 13.5-point favorites.
That's a pretty big number.
And
anytime you see a number like that, you go with the underdog. This is a trap game, I think, for Philadelphia, especially considering what the Giants do well defensively. Dare I say that? They're going to send pressure. They're going to blitz you. They're going to mess up the timing of this offense. If the Eagles can get their running game going and have balance, then I think they'll be okay. But what's gotten Jalen Hurts in trouble, it feels like, during this losing streak is constantly trying to push the football down the field, not taking the check down and the layup underneath. And they haven't been on schedule. Brian Johnson, their play caller, has got a lot of scrutiny for that. I think Jalen's just got to play better ball.
Meanwhile, they've changed their other play caller.
Exactly, which is weird
Matt
to me.
Patricia taking over for Sean Desai defensively.
Yeah.
I do think that the Eagles are more insulated from the Giants than any other team in the league because they have the best offensive line in the league, and they see it twice as often.
They'll be without their left guard this week, though. And I think Lane may be out this week, too.
Yeah,
so they may be down 2 guys.
They might be, but they still got Jason Kelsey to get everything organized, and that is a big deal. Then, last but best, honestly, forget not least, Ravens and 49ers. How about the Niners 6-point favorites at home?
It's up to 6 now.
It's up to 6.
I thought it was a 3 when I first saw it, 3.5.
It is 6, man. It is San Francisco playing incredible ball since the bye, averaging nearly 40 a game. Ravens obviously playing not quite at that level, but they're 11-3 and the best team currently in the AFC.
Yeah, I think the Lamar Jackson effect will be on full display Monday night. He's been special here in the last month, making plays off schedule. But if you notice, there was a point in the season where the Niners struggled, and everyone pointed to Trent Williams and Deebo Samuel being out.
Seems relevant.
Yeah, their secondary had issues during that stretch as well. Kirk Cousins lit them up. Joe Burrow lit them up in back-to-back weeks. I think what Baltimore has on the perimeter could challenge what they have in the secondary. Odell Beckham starting to get into form here, and Zay Flowers having a heck of a rookie year.
I kind of feel a Niners blowout here.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't see the Ravens getting blown out. I don't know.
They are – when they get behind – like, they're not built to play from behind.
Yeah, correct.
I think Todd Monken's done a tremendous job. I do think they're better built to come from behind than they have been in years past.
Right.
They have better weapons on the outside. Lamar is more mature and obviously more advanced as a passer as he's continued to grow throughout his career. Offensively, they're not as they're not as reliant on running the football schematically. So I think that, I do think that we're talking Niners, though.
Really?
The way that they've played offensively, I know the Ravens defense is really good. Maybe it's not 45-10 like it has been, but like 35-21 by the end of it. Like, I think the Niners are definitively the best team in football.
I will say this. The one area of San Francisco's O-line that kind of struggles is their interior, and I wonder if the Ravens' D-tackles can feast in that part of the matchup.
The good thing, though, for them is they have this guy named Kyle Shanahan who knows how to scheme things up. Yeah. A guy that knows how Kyle Shanahan thinks pretty well is Logan Paulsen because he played for him for 6 of the 10 NFL seasons that he played. That has created a very smart football mind, and although he is not here today with us in person, Logan and I did chat this week on the Take Command podcast about the Commanders and Jets game. You'll hear his breakdown of the game next. Then Grant Paulson joins us at 12:30. Basically, it's an hour of Paulson's next. Lynnell. Lynnell Willingham there. Craig Hoffman here with you live at Tap Sports Bar, MGM National Harbor on a burgundy and gold game day. Command Pregame Show on a burgundy and gold game day. Lynnell Willingham in for Logan Paulsen today. I am Craig Hoffman. As usual, we're live at Tap Sports Bar, MGM National Harbor. Now, it would feel very silly, Lynnell, not to let Logan break down this game.
Well, yeah.
So, in order to not rob you, the listening audience, of Logan Paulsen's brilliance, despite Lynnell and I trying our best over here, which we've given you a good show so far. I think we've done 2 very solid hours of radio. We did want to let you hear from Logan, though. Had a really great breakdown on Take Command this week on the podcast. So in case you missed that, which we put out on Friday morning, here is Logan and I breaking down Jets and Commanders.
If you want to see like elite football, I think their defense is playing pretty gosh darn good.
Yeah.
And for how badly their offense is played and for all the stuff that all the kind of adversity that team has faced this year, like the defense has been exceptional and they remain exceptional.
For sure.
You know,
rough week last week against the Dolphins, but against the Dolphins, and they got no
week.
Support from their offense. And, you know, one of those touchdowns comes when Zach Wilson gets just absolutely bamboozled by Bradley Chubb, and they recover a fumble at the 2-yard line. So that is what it is. But Sam Howell going to try to have a bounce back game. He's had 3 bad ones in a row against a defense that's super elite. How does this offense try to accomplish that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's going to be tough. So, like, let's just start with what they want to be, the Jets. And I think the Jets, they are, like, day one install, I think they want to be like a quarters team. So you see a lot of these guys, like, coming out of the Seattle cover 3 stuff, they've kind of changed their perspective. Obviously, Robert Saleh is from that defensive tree, and they've all kind of added a little bit of wrinkles. So, you know, I think you look at Dan Quinn, he kind of goes a lot more kind of Tampa 2 coverages with mixed in with man. Robert Saleh, at least in my understanding and my perspective, obviously he's going to run 2, he's going to run 6, but I think base day one is quarters, right? So you get the 4 guys across the back. And the reason you do that is it keeps everything in front of you, and it lets that safety kind of be that run player. It's you know, obviously this team ran it a couple of years ago, a little bit more quarters, a little bit more palms, however you want to call that. So I think that's what they want to be, but they do run an absolute boatload of man-to-man coverage. They run a ton of man-to-man coverage, and I think it makes sense because you've got guys like Sauce Gardner, you've got guys like DJ Reed, who is playing really well. Everyone talks about Sauce, but DJ Reed's playing really good football. Both their safeties are very, very good football players, very instinctive, and when you watch them, especially in the back end, it feels like you're watching Dallas. Just a bunch of guys who are extremely confident, extremely well coached. They know what hurts them. They know how to stop those things. And they're very, very confident in terms of their responsibilities. And I think when I first started watching, quite honestly, the Jets, I thought, oh, man, it's the pass rush that drives them. Much like Dallas, it's the pass rush that drives Dallas's defensive production. And while the pass rush is very good, obviously Quentin Williams is one of the best defensive tackles in football. They've got a whole bunch of very dynamic, probably 6 or 7 guys that are very dynamic rushing the passer, but it's a different type of pass rusher. They've got like John Franklin Myers, who's like 290 pounds, who's like this classic edge collapser as a pass rusher, right? They've got Michael Clemens, who's very, very similar. He's big. He's 280. They're crashing edges. They got Jeremiah Johnson, big physical guys who's got a little more juice, but you don't see this quick win kind of relentless pass rush that you get from Dallas. It's a much more, we're compressing the pocket, and the coverage drives their pressure production, I think. So I think that's when you mentioned Sam Howell and this defense, it's kind of like, I think it's very apropos that we have the reception perception guys on, because how do you win versus man-to-man coverage? How do you hold the space, and how do you anticipate throws? Because while the rush isn't as dynamic as Dallas is, for example, it's still very dynamic. It's still very effective, and they really rely on the coverage to make you hold the ball for a beat and let that rush get home and get pressures and get sacks. And I think that's going to be the matchup of the day, in my opinion, is receivers versus corners. And then can you get the ball out quickly enough that rush can't kind of compress you into a black hole?
From a play calling standpoint, a combination of quarters and man is really difficult, because in quarters, theoretically, the open stuff is going to be quick underneath. That's the stuff that man coverage often shuts down, especially if you play press. Like if Sauce Gardner's right up on you, you call Dragon Lion, whatever they call it in this system, but your double slants on one side, slant flat on the other. And you're like, this will be great against quarters coverage. We got, these slant routes that one of them is going to pop open. And you're like, well, now I got Sauce Gardner pressed up on a slant. Do I really want to throw that? And then you just hope that the slant flat on the other side works. And even if it does, you're probably throwing that quick flat route and, they come up, they tackle, it's 4 yards and you haven't gotten very far. Then all of a sudden you're like, okay, well, they're playing man. Let's go some man beaters. And then they just sit back in quarters and they pass it off and it's easy and they've got it covered. So that's a tough concept or tough pairing of coverages as a play caller to deal with. How, what is then the idea? I would think, if I got a bunch of deep defenders or man to man, those are good running opportunities, but we know that EB's probably not going to all of a sudden say, hey, Brian Robinson, 25 carries for you today, assuming that B-Rob is back.
Well, I do think that one thing, if you're calling a game, you have to be hyper aware of how poor the Jets offense is. And we'll talk about them more detail in a second. But I get a report, PFF does a report and kind of does rankings, offensive rankings. And I've never seen a report like this in the 3 years I've had access to this information, where it's like 32nd in explosive plays, 32nd in touchdowns, 32nd in first downs, 32nd in total yards. They are a bad offense. They are very bad offensively. So if I'm EB, we talked about game flow earlier this year and how you got to manage game flow. This is a game where I think you can trust, just after a while, we'll talk about the offense here in a sec, but like trust your defense to not give up 10 points and just be like, we can manage this game offensively. We'll run the football. We'll be semi-efficient on third down. That's another thing. On third down, they do all sorts of crazy stuff. They've got 5 or 6 guys up right at the line of scrimmage. Who's coming? Who's dropping out? Is it man? Is it some form of zone? So you want to stay out of those situations as much as possible. But I really think, like, if there's a game you want to kind of put this thing in a 4-wheel drive, this is the game to do it. And obviously, because I think when you look at the first Miami game, they have 2 picks, the Jets defense, that keep them in it. You look at the Philly game this year, 3 interceptions. They win the game because of the defense. The Bills game early in the year, 3 interceptions. They win the game because of the defense. And it's so rare now in the NFL to see teams truly winning with defensive production, but that's what they're doing. So if you can kind of negate the teeth of that team, which is the defense, play conservative football, protect the ball, I think you're going to be in an okay spot. Now, to your point, that's not really been EB's MO ever. And it looked like they were going to show shades of that against the Giants in the second outing, and it was semi-effective until they fumbled the ball twice. But I do think, like, I would probably look at that. I'd say, like, Chris Rodriguez, you've been very efficient running the football. How do we maximize your touches? I think, and then if Brian Robinson's healthy, great. If Gibson's healthy, great. You've got a great opportunity there to kind of, again, maximize that backfield, insulate the offensive line from this physical pass rush, and it's okay to punt. Like I really believe that in this game, it's okay to punt because the offense for them is I don't want to say toothless, but been very, very ineffective this year.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And Logan, you ready for the best kept secret in the entire National Football League?
No, what is it?
Well, tough. You're going to get it anyway. You better get ready. You got 3,
I'm ready.
2. The Washington Commanders are a top 10 team in yards per carry. It is the dirtiest secret in the whole league. Because this drives me nuts. I've literally responded to YouTube comments this week on my page when people are like, we can't run it. I was like, if only there was a place that you could look up this statistic and then copied and pasted the link to ESPN.com's stats section with yards per carry being the sorting metric. The Washington Commanders, by yards per carry, are the 7th best team in the NFL. I say that knowing that we've talked on this podcast about how we think the run game could be a lot better. It's not particularly schemed great. Some of that is probably enhanced by Sam Howell scrambles and the fact that they don't run the ball a ton with the running backs. In fact, they do it less than basically everyone else in football. So those scrambles impact that average in an outsized way. But at the end of the day, we are 15 weeks into the season. They are 7th in yards per carry. That is a relevant statistic. And so the idea that they're actually bad at it, yes, they've been bad in short yardage. Like their success rate in short yardage has not been very good. So there are certain situations where they have been a quote unquote bad running football team. However, down in, down out, they can do it. And part of it is because they subvert expectation because no one ever expects them to run. And so I do think that becomes critically important. EB has got to do that this weekend. It is for game flow, for Sam, for everything. It is the right way to play, and they're not nearly as bad at it as everyone thinks.
Yeah, and I think, if EB's not going to do it, like, what is his analogous for that? Is it the quick game? You mentioned the press coverage they're going to get. Is it screens? Like, is it, whatever that looks like, you need something, again, that's going to deleverage the quarterback, deleverage the offensive line, put those guys in good positions to be successful, and allow the Jets defense not to win the game. And, obviously that's a lot of that responsibility is on Sam, but I do think, and how you call that game, it's going to be very, very impactful to that as well. So,
no doubt about it. All right, quickly on the other side of it, that putrid Jets offense and against a league worst Commanders defense, and in a battle in bad versus bad, someone's got to do something. Who's the someone?
Right. So I will say, they do have a couple guys on the offense that are dynamic. Garrett Wilson, there's a play from the Dallas game earlier this season where he takes a drift and he takes it 80 yards for a touchdown. Like, he's an explosive playmaker. And they just don't – Breece Hall, explosive playmaker, right? And you see guys like – I was just watching film last night, like the Broncos misfit a counter. Counter's easy. And Breece Hall takes it, I think, 65 for a touchdown. Like, they have pieces. I think their offensive line is kind of talk about bad offensive line play. I think they've got some pieces on there that get you excited, like Lakeland Tomlinson, Mekhi Becton, finally healthy, finally playing like that first-round player. Joe Tippmann, their center, is a guy they drafted in the second round, doing good stuff. But the right side is a bunch of backups, right? Elijah Vera Tucker's hurt. He's out. Their starting right tackle is hurt. He's out. So you get Carter Warren, a guy that I liked in the draft a lot from Pittsburgh, but is a fourth-round draft pick, Max Mitchell was their starting tackle last year. He's playing guard. So they've got some pieces moving around. And then you get a quarterback in Zach Wilson who holds the ball for long periods of time. And that, kind of in the same vein like that we're experiencing here, makes that group look worse. And I think it's kind of a combination of errors. So I think one thing I'm excited for is the defensive line, possibly in a get-right kind of game situation here. Which would be fantastic, because if they can produce, I think it insulates the back end. And I think the back end has been slowly playing better each and every week. And I think if they can get enough pressure, they can do a really good job against this team. But they do have big playmakers, and it's just about making sure they're contained and make sure they don't impact it. Because I don't think Breece Hall's had an explosive carry for like the last 3 weeks. And, Garrett Wilson has been similarly quiet. Obviously, it's impossible to completely shut him out of an offense, but he's been doing okay. So can you continue to make them struggle? Can you continue to make them look very bad? And I think the answer is yes, but I've said that before and totally overestimated where this defense has been at for the Commanders.
So we'll see. We'll see how that goes today.
Yeah.
Because we have certainly. This will be the week. Oh, there goes another guy wide open up the sideline. Lynnell and I will continue to talk about it for the final 45 minutes, including with Grant Paulson coming up at 12:30. Up next, our pick six. Who are the 6 most important players for the Commanders today against the Jets? We'll tell you on the Take Command Pregame Show on a Burgundy and Gold game day. Command Pregame Show on a burgundy and gold game day, live from Tap Sports Bar, MGM National Harbor with Lynnell Willingham today. I am Craig Hoffman. Logan back next week after the holiday. That'll be a Logan Paulsen Bowl, by the way, next week.
Next week.
San Francisco.
We play the Niners.
Yeah. Last year, I think they had every Logan Paulsen Bowl. We played Atlanta, we played Houston, we played San Francisco, played Chicago.
Atlanta, yeah.
This year, all of them but Houston. So it's kind of the way it goes. My man bounced around after he left Washington.
Yes, he did.
Got some good experience.
That's why those pockets look good.
Brought it back home, and now analyzes football with me. What a terrible career turn. Anyway, before we get to our pick six, let's do the injury report real quick, which is brought to you by the Centers for Advanced Orthopedics. More physicians, more locations, more advanced care centered around one thing. You visit CFAortho.com. Lynnell, I know you're all fired up about some of the guys who are active today. In terms of the actual injureds, you have Brian Robinson out with a hamstring. Charles Leno is out. Tyler Larson is out. That means Nick Gates and Cornelius Lucas will start at center and left tackle, respectively. Antonio Gibson, Chris Rodriguez will split the responsibility at tailback. But they've also moved some things around quickly that you're really excited about at the tight end position.
Yeah, they're going to make Curtis Hodges active for the first time this season. Cole Turner will also be active as well. He's had like 4 straight DNPs, it feels like. Back in August, when we were talking about this Eric Bieniemy offense and what they look like during camp, the position versatility, or excuse me, the personnel variety that they could go with running the 3 tight end set, we haven't seen that really in the regular season. Part of that has been due to injury and ineffective play from the guys that
they just
that
don't
have
trust
been
those
healthy.
guys.
And they don't trust them.
Yeah.
Young group, so I'm excited to see that. And then Andre Jones being inactive was kind of interesting to me. You made some sense out of it with James Smith-Williams coming back. You now bump KJ Henry into that third edge rusher spot. So,
there's definitely for sure. We'll see what they do on teams without Andre Jones, but ultimately James back. KJ Henry's been way better than Jones has been on the edge. Worth it to make that substitution. That is your injury report brought to you by CFA Ortho. All right, now time for our pick six. At 6 p.m. on Fridays, Anthony Haney, my producer on The Hoffman Show, and I pick 6 players we think will have the most outsized impact on the game, and these are our 6 for this week. Run them by Logan on Sundays. Lynnell, you get to be judge, jury, and potentially executioner on this group today. We typically take Sam Howell off the board, but considering the circumstances here, I think Sam was fair game this week, and thus I put him number 1. Fairly obvious why the quarterback's important, but I think that coming off of the game they had last week where he gets benched, his ability to bounce back, if he does not and he just continues to press and panic, they got no shot today. Nope. And if he can keep it, within the ropes, I think they have a great chance to win. Yeah, I agree with you. I think it makes a ton of sense. How he responds is going to be the big talking point. The final 3 weeks, you got 3 really good defenses. Another one here today. We'll see how he responds to it. For sure. And the other thing, too, is the only way the Jets win is if they get turnovers. And Sam, obviously, is the determiner of that. Next pick was Emmanuel Forbes, a great one that Anthony picked, because, it'd be cool if your first-round pick played. A little bit. It's a hell of a concept you got there. Matchup-wise, right, is why they said he didn't play last week. Well, I think this receiving core with Garrett Wilson, I think it's an even more difficult matchup. So I'm excited to see Emmanuel Forbes because we need to see our first-round pick. I'm kind of out on the kid already. I don't like some of the social media stuff I see. I don't like all the extracurricular after plays. I'm just kind of out on him, and that's kind of an unfair spot to be put in, but that's where I sit. Yeah, I don't really take a whole lot out of a rookie season where he was coached by a guy who was coaching high school DBs. Well, there's that. Yeah. So matchup. What? He's a first-round pick. Put him out there. Yeah. You drafted him to guard anybody. That's why he's a first-round pick. Number 3, Nick Gates. Obviously, very, very important. Last time Nick Gates played a game at MetLife Stadium, he got destroyed by the interior lineman of a New York football team. Today at MetLife Stadium, Quinnen Williams is waiting for him to repeat that fate. Yeah, it's probably going to get ugly. We may see Nolan Laufenberg, but he's inactive, Craig. So we're going to rock with Nick Gates to center today and roll with the results. Who is their backup center then? If Larson is out, Stromberg's out, Laufenberg is inactive. Let's hope we don't have to find out, shall we? A tough spot to be. Literally, who is playing guard for them? So it would be Sadiq, Chris Paul, Cosme. None of those guys have ever played. Is Mason Brooks called up from the practice squad? Does he have center background at all? Maybe. I don't know.
That's a really, really bad spot to be in. But like you said, hopefully they don't have to get to that.
I'm going to text Kime in the break. Be like, hey, terrible thing for me to ask. Who's their backup center?
Yeah.
Number 4, Curtis Samuel.
The guy.
He has actually had a very good season.
Yes.
And I obviously think that in order for Sam to continue to bounce back, or for Sam to start to bounce back, getting Curtis Samuel the football seems like a good idea.
Yeah, I love what Eric Bieniemy's done with him. You're seeing him lined up in the backfield. You're seeing him in the jet motion stuff. His ability to separate, though, at the top of routes and run away from DBs, I think, has been his best attribute this year.
Cam Curl next at number 5 in our pick 6. Cam, he was involved in the busted coverage last week. He has not made the plays that you would hope for someone seeking the contract he is seeking. Can he rise to that elite level? Can they shore up the back end? Can they please just not bust a coverage?
For Cam this week, because you're going against Trevor Siemian, I don't even worry about them getting beat over the top. If
the way you get beat over the top is you bust a coverage, you make it so that anybody could throw that ball.
But going against the Jets, Percy Butler will probably be your deep center fielder. They're going to play a lot of 8-man boxes to try to stop the run. How does he run fit? How does he make plays in the run game? How does he guard the tight end? Jack Conklin's had a really good year. So it's some interesting matchups for Cam. But as you mentioned, got to earn the bag.
And last but not least, Tucker Addington, baby. Yeah, he is. Do you know who Tucker Addington is?
It's the new long snapper, I think.
That is correct. He is your new long snapper.
Woo-hoo.
The Cameron Cheeseman experience is over. Yes, Lynnell, because I'm 4 years old, they finally cut the cheese. When we get back here on the Take Command Pregame Show, yep, I just said that in a public place. We are live at Tab Sports Bar, MGM National Harbor. Grant Paulson, we'll see if he survived the mall with his child on Christmas Eve and also talk about the football game. That is next. Take Command Pregame Show, 106.7 The Fan, the Team 980 YouTube, and always live on the free Odyssey app. live at Tap Sports Bar, MGM National Harbor, on Take Command Pregame Show, and I'll hold these up to the camera, and then I probably might have one of these.
Old Bay.
Yeah, they are definitely Old Bay wings. Doc Walker is here, and he just came over with 30, not even 30. About 3 seconds before we went on air, I was like, "Can I offer you guys some wings?"
Oh, he timed that out perfectly. He waited for the rejoin and all that.
Right in front of us. And so now, as we sit and talk to Grant Paulson here on the Take Command Pregame Show, we have to smell wings that we can't eat because we have to be prepared to ask Grant questions. Like Grant Paulson, who joins us now, I guess you did survive. How scathed or unscathed are you from a trip with your child to the mall on Christmas Eve?
Well, first things first. I think that is actually my version of like hell or purgatory or something, is the idea that someone brings over wings and I have to look at them and smell them.
Yes, I'm literally just staring right at them.
Just in perpetuity for all eternity, just looking at and smelling wings that I can't eat sounds like the worst thing imaginable.
Yeah.
We had a good time. It was seamless and I would say efficient. I was worried about it. This was her big idea. She decided, for whatever reason, last night that she wanted to go shopping after the mall was closing, and so that meant we were getting up this morning to do it. But super cute. She picked out a bunch of things. Some of them were very expensive, so we put those back on the shelves. And we dabbled to some other shelves, but it was a good time. She ended up. We went to get something for her mom, and she got something for her sister and her brother too. So she was fired up.
Oh, that's great. That's good job, Reagan. Excellent work out of you. Although next year, maybe a little less risky, a little earlier in the holiday season.
But
she's got to learn. And so this was year one. She got the thoughtfulness down. Next year we'll work on the timing. Just a step-by-step progression.
In fairness, I'll take the she takes after me. This is probably the first year I haven't been at the mall for myself on Christmas Eve
shopping.
Enough.
She's like, just go with Dad in emergency mode.
Exactly. So it all worked out. It just kept a tradition alive for me, I guess.
Yeah, there you go. All right, so let's, because we're supposed to, talk about this Jets-Commanders game.
We have
to. You've been a Washington football fan your entire life, Grant. Can you remember a game that you have been less excited for than this one?
That's actually a really good question. I mean, I'm sure there are a lot like this one, frankly, where it's the end of a lost season. But here's why I think you might be onto something in this regard if we're ranking them. I mean, this is such a kind of playing out the fourth quarter of like an NBA game in a 19-point game. There's like 2:11 left. Like, you think about it. I mean, everyone notable essentially is going to be gone. So this really is literally just a countdown at this point, and I don't mean this personally toward anybody, but it's organizationally a countdown toward January 8th in a lot of ways. So with that in mind, no, I mean, this is a pretty largely irrelevant day. It's not the preseason. I mean, let's not make it out to be that nothing matters. Sam Howell's performance today is significant. Obviously, these guys put their bodies and blood, sweat, and tears on the line. And you got guys like Terry McLaurin who are trying to climb, all-time organizational lists, and they've been grinding toward today since, early July. So it matters to them. But there's 7 or 8 players probably whose performances today are significant to me. Some of them are young, ascending kind of pieces. Others are guys I'm trying to figure out, like Benjamin St. Juste. What are they a year from now with another coaching staff? But big picture, bring on January. Let's do this thing.
Grant, I'm going to come way out of left field with this one. There was a report that came out Friday, I believe, in Jeremy Fowler and Dan Graziano's notebook previewing this weekend. And the question was asked, what veteran do you expect to get traded before free agency the way that Jalen Ramsey did last year from the Rams to the Dolphins? Fowler listed Jonathan Allen as that guy, and we know he got on the Junkies about a month ago and said, he's tired of losing, and we know what he had to say about that. What would be your thought process moving into this offseason in terms of what veterans are worth keeping and what veterans are worth moving?
If they play offense and they help a young quarterback develop, they're worth keeping. If they play defense and they don't, then I'm in the market and figuring out what I can get. And look, Daron Payne, outstanding football player. John Allen, really, really good. Of the two, I wanted to pay Allen over Payne, still feel that way. I'd want to keep Allen over Payne moving forward. I also think maybe coincidentally, Payne might have a little bit more value on the open market as it is. But regardless, yeah, one of those two guys being shopped makes a lot of sense to me. I thought it was redundant and unnecessary to pay both, just because I thought it was going to make it really difficult to pay one of the defensive ends. They obviously feel like they can pay both tackles, and I understand why. I mean, if you're going to have a organization where you care about defense, you better have a really good defensive line. So there's plenty of ways to go about spending your money. It just didn't make a ton of sense to me to make both of those guys as highly paid as they did. But if you could dangle one of the two of them and recoup some assets, I think I can play that game. I'm okay with that. I'd feel okay about getting a couple of picks back, keeping the other one as kind of the anchor of whatever iteration of the line begins in 2024 and beyond, and then drafting a defensive end early, and the core would be, say, in this hypothetical, like if Allen were to get moved, you'd have Payne, a top 40 pick at defensive end you're hoping can give you 8.5, 9 sacks next year, and then maybe a free agent you bring in who's a lot cheaper than Sweat would have been, who might be able to give you another 7.5, 8 sacks, something like that.
Right. It's worth pointing out a couple of things on that front. I agree with you on a pure analysis standpoint, player to player, but Payne's almost untradeable because you paid him last year. Yeah. The dead money you'd have to pay on that contract makes it so you'd have to get multiple firsts back probably to make it worth it. Which is extra unfortunate because they used a second rounder on Phil Mathis last year as well, who is a more direct replacement for Daron Payne than John Allen. So if you're going to pick one and then hope to have another replacement in-house, you have the Payne replacement, although it's obviously a downgrade, but you don't have the Allen replacement. The contracts play out the other way. Sadness. Imagine that, Grant. Lack of a cohesive strategy on the Ron Rivera roster.
Well, so two things on that, right? I mean, number one, that's kind of been one of my biggest gripes all along is it never really felt like the moves all worked together in like one larger plan. It kind of always, to me, has felt like it was very in the moment. Not spontaneous, but I guess just like, almost like shopping hungry. Like, what do you want right now? That looks good. Yeah. And I feel like that was the last several years of the operation. It wasn't like all fitting into some master stroke here. So that there is something to be said for that. I mean, the out of the Payne deal is essentially after 25, basically where it turns into like a 3-year, $67 million contract, and then you could spread $11 million out over a couple years. I don't know the ramifications of trading him. It sounds like, maybe almost quarterback-like where you'd eat money.
Yeah, it'd be 25 plus dead million. Shoo. Or 25 million dead cap next year.
Yeah, I'm not that interested in that. But
not at all.
The point is, like, well, it doesn't matter. My frustration with that deal was, do you really need to pay him that much money, or would it be better with a fifth-round quarterback who's got a propensity to take sacks to spend that on a tackle and a guard and a tight end, or something like that?
Totally.
They did what they did, and he's still a really good football player, arguably a top 2 or 3 player on the team, so probably not the right guy to zero in on and say, why did they do this?
For sure. No, I mean, that's the thing is each decision is justifiable on its own. Together, you're like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Last question for you. I asked Sheehan this earlier because he was talking about some reports of, is Salah's job on the line today / over the next 3 weeks. And obviously there's been some rumors about Tomlin in Pittsburgh. And I know, Grant, you are like me in that you would prefer to go with one of these young offensive minds, whether it's Ben Johnson, whether it's Bobby Slowick, whether it's Frank Smith out of Miami. One of these guys that seems to really understand the quarterback position and how to insulate and kind of match it with the right running game, all that stuff that we like about modern NFL offense. But if Salah or Tomlin was available, would that change your pecking order at all for potential replacements for Ron Rivera?
Salah, no. Tomlin, yes. Yeah. Which is not to say, like, I've seen people talk about, media people, fans, whatever. But I've seen people say, well, if Mike Tomlin becomes available, you trade picks, give him a blank check. I can have 2 different conversations. Number one, I think Mike Tomlin would be the player in the league, or the coach in the league, if I was a player that I would most want to play for. And I would even say he's one of my top 3 favorite coaches in the NFL. And I still wouldn't trade picks for him. I think that's bad business, and I think that's silly. I also think a blank check or whatever the idea would be preposterous. I mean, he's gotten the offensive coordinator thing wrong over and over again. And while he is incredible in kind of what I call Gary Williams-like, you give him 53 guys, you give everyone else 53 guys, I think he gets more out of them. They're limited in some ways because as a defensive-minded guy, until he hits a home run on the offensive side, it doesn't really matter, how good you're doing as a leader of men and on defense. Like, that's the tough thing for Ron Rivera in his career, where he's had so many losing seasons. So for all those reasons, I mean, would I be interested in Tomlin if he became available? Absolutely. If they hired him, would I be excited? Totally. Would I take Frank Smith over him as an unknown? Yes. Shane Waldron over him as an unknown? Yes. You ran through the list of the key guys like Ben Johnson. I am hiring an offensive-minded coach. I'm finding my own Mike Tomlin. No head coach has ever won a Super Bowl in 2 places, ever. That's not a coincidence. Retread defensive coaches, I have very little interest in. Tomlin breaks that rule for me because he's awesome, and I love him. And he's, a guy that I think I would want him to lead any project I have in my life.
Right.
But it's still not like a break glass in case of emergency. You've got to do this. Like, no. I mean, there's something that works. We all see it.
He's never been under 500. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Totally. But also, just look at the proof. The offensive-minded coaches' offenses are better. Offenses are more important. Statistically, which is crazy over about 20 years, offensive-minded coaches' defenses are better. I really can't even explain that. But that's now been studied and proven. There's a great piece on this by Neil Greenberg. Offensive-minded teams win more in the playoffs and are in the running for the Super Bowl. They should be hiring offense, period.
Wow. Grant Paulson, the takes are strong, and you can hear them weekday afternoons, 2 to 6:30 on 106.7 The Fan. I know you're off tomorrow for Christmas. Back on Tuesday. Or are you pulling a short week as well?
There's a weird bowl game at some point. I think Virginia Tech, is that Tuesday or Wednesday? I don't know.
I don't know.
One of those days we're off for a bowl game. It's that time of year where you never know when you're working.
Right.
But otherwise, we will be in talking about football.
I figured out earlier in the show that when Sheehan was on, I'm the only sucker on the 980 side of things that's working all 4 days this week. So good job. Good job out of me. Anyway, Grant and Danny, 2 to 6:30 on 106.7 The Fan.
Pull that rope.
Yep.
All right,
just trying to pull my weight. Thank you, Grant. Much appreciated. Merry Christmas, sir.
I have to go sign up for YouTube TV now, since this game's going to be blacked out again in my area.
Okay.
Well, you can use my subscription. I accidentally subscribed for it to get the free trial a couple of weeks ago.
And you
this
forgot
Friday
to
when we
cancel.
got paid, $82.99 just zapped out of my account.
Oof.
So if you want the login, send me a text.
I canceled DirecTV this week. CBS and DirecTV have been in this stare down, match for months. So I've missed all the way back to Alabama, Georgia, Army, Navy, and now the second week in a row, the Commanders are not on locally if you have DirecTV, which is just a joke.
That is
Upset.
rough. All right, we're going to go eat these wings in the commercial break.
Have fun.
All right, see you. That is Grant Paulson with us here on the Take Command Pregame Show. When we get back, our difference makers of the game, our picks, if that matters.
Right.
We'll wrap it up next. Lynnell and Craig with you from Tap Sports Bar at MGM National Harbor on a burgundy and gold game day. Take Command Pregame Show wrapping up here at Tap Sports Bar. We are at MGM National Harbor. I'm Craig Hoffman. He is Lynnell Willingham. With you, I will be on the postgame show. Actually, another Logan not doing the postgame show either. Our guy Mark Bullock.
Mark!
We're going international,
From
baby.
across the pond.
Does a great job breaking down the film. We'll be on, and this one, because of the way the timing can work today, we don't have to wait on Logan to do another show post-game. Pretty much right after the game. We'll be back on YouTube at the Team 980 at 106.7 The Fan. Other things to pass along before we get to our final difference makers and predictions here. Ian Rappaport, NFL Network, reporting that Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas, the Jets head coach and GM, are back next season. So not surprised there. Looks like
We'll see what happens.
Jim Harbaugh is also allegedly going to stay at Michigan for another season. I'll believe
Baloney.
that one when he's out there at spring practice and all the other jobs have been filled. Never believe college coaches. Ever. But allegedly that's the case according to Rapp over at NFL Network. All right, it is time for our difference makers of the game presented by Zips Cleaners. Zips Cleaners knows that looking good makes all the difference, whether on the field, on the job, or wherever life takes you. At just $3.29 or less per garment, we make it easy and affordable to look your best. Find a Zips near you at zipscleaners.com. All right, Lynnell, difference maker of the game.
So this is not going to be the sexiest pick. I'm going to go with the starting center this week, Nick Gates, back in the lineup. He got benched about a month ago for poor performance in this very venue. Ironically enough, he's going up against Quinnen Williams, one of the better defensive tackles in the game. If the Jets can get interior pressure on Sam Howell, I think it is going to crumble Washington's offensive game plan. We know balance a big part of that as well, but Nick Gates got to hold his water today.
Yeah, that's a pretty big freaking deal. And if you want to add Chris Paul and Sadiq Charles, I'm curious how they rotate those guys.
Yeah, Sadiq was good last week, I thought.
Sadiq was solid. I mean, they both, PFF grade-wise, were terrible. But Sadiq was better than Chris, and it didn't seem like some of their mistakes had massive implications. So I'm very curious to see how that rotation goes this week. And I would also like to remind Ron Rivera, if you can rotate your left guards who are late-round picks who might or might not be here next year, you can rotate your cornerbacks, including your first-round pick, Emmanuel Forbes, who's very important to the future of your football team, even if you're not. That felt a little harsh by the end, but
attaboy, breathe. There we go.
All right, difference maker of the game presented by Zips Cleaners. For me, I'm going to go with Antonio Gibson. You made a really astute point in a break earlier, so I will credit you for this. Jets play a lot of quarters, play a lot of man. Quarters leaves your flats open, so Antonio Gibson, great as a pass catcher there. Man coverage, hey-oh, let's get Antonio Gibson matched up on some linebackers. So, one, does he play a lot, or do you get the Chris Rodriguez, playing most of the snaps at Delio? And two, can you get him the football? Because he's super dangerous and very, very good. All right, Lynnell, 90 seconds left of the show. Who you got?
I don't care.
It's not the question I asked. Because I do care, but I don't. It's weird because you do want them to win because that's how you're conditioned, but you don't because you know the repercussions from a draft position standpoint.
I'm going to follow my parlays today. I like Washington. I got a -3. It's good plus money. I just think they're better than the Jets. Offensively, the Jets are handicapped. If Washington can get some pressure and keep this a low-scoring game, they should have the advantage. No turnovers, please, Mr. Sam Howell.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of faith that's going to happen. I just have less faith in the Jets' defense or in the Jets' offense. Trevor Siemian is not good, and neither their offensive line is not good. James Smith-Williams coming back might be enough to push the Commanders' defense over the edge. I know I love James as a human and all, but that really it could be the difference today. If they don't turn it over like 4 times, the Commanders should win this football game. There's definitely a chance that they bust a couple of coverages and turn the ball over a bunch and come out on the wrong end of it, which would actually be the right end of it.
Yes.
But I'm gonna go Washington 13-10. That's the score a lot of people want. Who do you have this week? The under. All right. Have a Merry Christmas, everybody. See you back Tuesday for the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. Thanks so much for listening to the Take Command Pregame.